It's a trap. The waitress slipped a note to the billionaire CEO at dinner. You know what? Let me tell you something that's going to break your heart the same way it broke mine. Let me tell you about the night a 22-year-old waitress saved my life by slipping me a piece of paper that said, "Run, it's a trap." Before I tell you about that night, I need you to understand who I am. I need you to understand how a man who spent his entire life helping others, who gave until it hurt, who loved unconditionally, ended up with people trying to kill him for his money. My name is Darius Williams, and I'm about to tell you the most painful story you'll ever hear about family, love, and betrayal. But before I proceed, I want you to do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop your country in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening to me from. Thank you. It was Tuesday night, March 15th, and I was sitting in my usual corner booth at Bella's Fine Dining in Charlotte. This was my sanctuary, the one place where I could just be myself without people wanting something from me. I'd been coming here every Tuesday for 3 years. Same table, same order, same routine. "Good evening, Mr. Williams," Celeste said as she approached with my usual sweet tea. She was one of the good ones, young, hard-working, reminded me of myself when I was her age. Over the months, I'd grown fond of her genuine smile and honest conversation. "Evening, Celeste. How's your mama doing?" "Much better, sir. That doctor you recommended really helped her with the pain." I'd quietly taken care of her mother's medical bills without her knowing, but seeing families struggle just brought back too many memories of my own childhood. "I'm glad to hear it. The usual tonight?" "You know me too well," I said, trying to smile. But something felt different tonight. Celeste seemed nervous, her hands shaking as she wrote down my order. 20 minutes later, when she brought my grilled salmon, she did something that changed my life forever. As she set down my plate, she slipped a folded piece of paper under my napkin. My blood ran cold as I felt it there waiting. I looked up at her, but she wouldn't meet my eyes, just walked away quickly, like she was scared of something. My hands trembled as I unfolded that paper and read the words that would save my life. "Mr. Williams, don't go home tonight. It's a trap. They're waiting for you. Please, trust me and run. Get somewhere safe. Call the police. Someone who cares." I sat there staring at those words, my whole world crashing down around me. Someone wanted to hurt me. Someone was waiting at my house to what? Rob me? Kill me? My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Simone. "Hey, baby, we made it to my sister's safely. The boys miss you already. Love you." Thank God my family was safe in Atlanta. But who would want to hurt me? And how did this young waitress know about it? As I sat there in that restaurant booth, holding that note that would save my life, I couldn't help but think about how I'd gotten to this point. How would a man who'd spent his entire life helping others, who gave until it hurt, who loved unconditionally, ended up with people trying to kill him for his money? Let me tell you my story from the beginning, because what happened to me that night was just the final chapter in a lifetime of people taking advantage of my kindness. I was born in the poorest part of Memphis, Tennessee, to a single mother who worked herself half to death just to keep us fed. But even as a little boy with holes in his shoes and patches on his clothes, I had a heart bigger than the state of Tennessee itself. I remember being 7 years old, walking to school with my lunch money, 50 cents, that Mama had scraped together from couch cushions and empty bottles, and seeing another kid who didn't have anything to eat. You know what I did? I gave him my 50 cents and went hungry that day, because even at 7 years old, I couldn't stand to see someone else suffering when I could do something about it. That's just who I was. That's who I've always been. My mama, Vernell Williams, she tried her best to raise me right, but she was working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. She cleaned offices at night, stocked shelves at the grocery store in the early morning hours, and watched other people's kids during the day. I hardly ever saw her when I was growing up, but when I did, she'd always tell me the same thing. Darius, baby, we ain't got much, but we got each other. Family comes first, no matter what. You remember that, you hear me? And Lord help me, I remembered it when it cost my lunch money. I remembered it when it meant giving away my only coat. I remembered it when it meant working extra jobs to help relatives who couldn't seem to help themselves. By the time I was 10 years old, I was the kid everyone in the neighborhood came to when they needed help. Mrs. Patterson needed her groceries carried up 3 flights of stairs. Little Darius was there with a smile, refusing the quarter she tried to give me because I could see she needed every penny for herself. Mr. Johnson's car wouldn't start and he needed to get to work. I'd figure out how to jump-start it or find someone who could, then ride my bicycle to school even though I was already late. I didn't do it for money or praise. I did it because seeing other people happy made me happy. Because knowing I'd helped someone sleep better at night made all my own problems seem smaller. And my family, Lord have mercy, they learned real quick that Darius would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. Let me tell you about some of the things I did for my family because I want you to understand just how far I was willing to go for people I loved. I want you to feel the same frustration and heartbreak that I felt when those same people turned their backs on me the moment I needed them. My older brother, Terrell, was always getting into trouble, always had some scheme, some get-rich-quick plan, some reason why he needed money right now, today, this very minute, or his whole world would fall apart. When Terrell was 15, he got arrested for shoplifting. Not food or medicine or anything he actually needed. Expensive sneakers that he wanted to impress some girl at school. The bail was $200, which might as well have been $2 million for our family. But did Terrell call Mama? Did he ask his friends for help? Did he accept the consequences of his own actions? No. He called his little brother Darius. D, I need your help, man. I'm in real trouble here. They say I gotta stay in jail until Monday if I can't make bail, and if I miss school on Monday, coach is gonna kick me off the basketball team. $200 was more money than I ever seen in my entire life. I was working part-time at the grocery store after school, making minimum wage and giving most of it to Mama for household expenses. I'd been saving for months to buy myself a decent shoes. The ones I had were so worn out that I could feel every rock and crack in the sidewalk. But this was my brother, my family, and family comes first no matter what. You know what I did? I worked double shifts for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping, barely eating, just working and saving every penny. I sold my bicycle, my only transportation to get to that grocery store job. I even pawned my grandfather's watch, the only thing I had left of him, the only thing in the world that was truly mine. I raised that $200 and bailed Terrell out of jail. Did he thank me? Did he promise to pay me back? Did he even seem grateful that his little brother had sacrificed everything to save him from spending the weekend in a cell? He clapped me on the shoulder, said, "Thanks, little brother, I owe you one," and never mentioned it again. Never paid me back a penny, never even acknowledged what I'd given up for him. But that was just the beginning. When Terrell was 17, he got his girlfriend pregnant and decided he needed a car so he could be responsible and drive her to doctor appointments. He came to me with this sob story about how he was going to be a father and he needed to step up, but he couldn't afford a down payment on a car. I'd been saving money for almost a year, planning to buy some tools so I could start doing handyman work on weekends. Had almost $800 hidden in a coffee can under my bed, more money than I'd ever had at one time. Terrell needed $500 for the down payment. D, I know it's a lot to ask, but this is about being a man, you know? This is about taking care of my responsibilities. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. So I gave him the money. $500 of my hard-earned savings, gone in an instant. 2 weeks later, I found out he'd spent the money on a gold chain and a pair of expensive basketball shoes, never bought a car, never went to any doctor appointments, and when the baby was born, he decided he wasn't ready to be a father after all and disappeared for 6 months. But somehow, when people in the family talked about it, I was the one who'd let Terrell down by not giving him more support. My younger brother Jamal was different from Terrell, but just as expensive. Where Terrell was always scheming and hustling, Jamal was just lost, always needing rescue from some situation that wasn't quite his fault, but somehow always required my money to solve. When Jamal was in high school, he got suspended for fighting and needed to transfer to a different school district to finish his senior year. The only way to make that happen was for someone in the family to move to that district, which meant higher rent, higher utilities, higher everything. Guess who got asked to make up the difference? I was 19 years old, working full-time at a construction job during the day and doing handyman work on weekends. I was finally starting to make decent money, finally starting to think about maybe getting my own apartment, maybe starting to build a life for myself. But Jamal needed to graduate, and family comes first. So I paid an extra $300 a month for 8 months to cover the higher rent in the better school district. $2,400 that could have been the down payment on my own apartment, gone to make sure my little brother could graduate high school. Did Jamal graduate? Yes, he did. Did he go to college? Did he get a job? Did he do anything productive with the opportunity I'd bought him? No. He spent the summer after graduation lying on the couch, playing video games, and complaining that there weren't any good jobs available for someone with his skills. When I suggested he might want to get any job, fast food, retail, anything, just to start earning some money and contributing to the household, he looked at me like I'd asked him to climb Mount Everest. Man, I didn't graduate high school to work at McDonald's. I'm going to find something better. He's still looking. My cousin Malik was probably the worst of them all because he was smart enough to know exactly what he was doing when he manipulated me. Malik was 2 years older than me, and when we were kids, I looked up to him like he was my big brother. He was smooth-talking, popular with girls, always seemed to know the right thing to say in any situation. I wanted to be like him, wanted him to approve of me, wanted him to see me as more than just his naive little cousin. And he used that against me every chance he got. I remember one Christmas when I was 16. I'd been working at the auto shop after school and weekends for months, saving every penny to buy myself a decent winter coat. Memphis winters are cold, and the jacket I had was more holes than fabric. My shoulders and arms were constantly freezing, but I kept telling myself that if I could just save up $150, I could buy a real coat that would actually keep me warm. 2 days before Christmas, Malik called me crying. Real tears, real desperation in his voice. "D, man, I need your help. My baby girl is sick and they cut off our electricity because I couldn't pay the bill. She's been coughing all night and it's so cold in the apartment. I'm scared she's going to get pneumonia or something worse. I need $150 to get the power turned back on, but I don't get paid until after New Year's." His baby girl. His 6-month-old daughter, who I'd held in my arms, who'd smiled at me and grabbed my finger with her tiny hand. The thought of her being cold and sick in a freezing apartment broke my heart. I took every dollar I'd saved for that coat and gave it to Malik. Spent Christmas morning shivering in my raggedy jacket while my baby cousin stayed warm and safe. Did Malik ever thank me? Did he ever pay me back when he got his next paycheck? Did he ever acknowledge what I'd given up for him? 3 weeks later, I found out he'd spent the money on a gold bracelet for his girlfriend and a pair of expensive sneakers for himself. The electricity had never been cut off, his daughter had never been sick, the whole story was a lie designed specifically to manipulate my feelings and separate me from my money. When I confronted him about it, you know what he said? "Come on, Dee, you know I was good for it. Besides, you didn't really need that coat. You're young and strong. A little cold never hurt nobody." These are the people I called family. These are the people I sacrificed for over and over again, believing that love and loyalty would eventually be returned. But it never was. Not once. My Aunt Brenda was maybe the most heartbreaking case of all, because her situation was always so genuinely desperate that I couldn't bring myself to say no even when I knew I was being taken advantage of. Brenda had 4 kids and a husband who drank too much and worked too little. They were always one emergency away from disaster. A broken down car, an unexpected medical bill, a missed rent payment that would lead to eviction, and somehow every one of those emergencies became my emergency. When her oldest son needed shoes for school, she called me. When her car broke down and she couldn't get to work, she called me. When the electricity got cut off because her husband spent the bill money on booze, she called me. "Darius, honey, I hate to ask, but I don't know where else to turn. The kids need to eat, and I just don't have the money this week." How do you no to that? How do you tell a woman with 4 hungry children that you're tired of being her safety net? How do you explain that you have your own dreams, your own goals, your own life that you're trying to build? You don't. At least, I couldn't. So I drive to the grocery store and fill 2 shopping carts with food. Not just the basics, but treats for the kids. Special things I knew they liked. Enough to last for weeks. I'd pay the electric bill, fix whatever was broken in their house, give Brenda cash for gas and school supplies and anything else she needed. Did her husband ever get a better job? Did he ever stop drinking? Did Brenda ever find a way to make ends meet without my constant financial support? What do you think? The worst part wasn't even the money, though. The worst part was how it made me feel about myself. Every time I gave in to one of these requests, every time I handed over money I couldn't really afford to people who never seemed to learn from their mistakes, I felt a little bit smaller, a little bit more like a fool. But I kept doing it because I loved them, because they were family, because I'd been taught that turning your back on family was the worst thing a person could do. By the time I graduated high school, I was already running a little handyman business out of my mama's garage. Nothing fancy, just me, some basic tools I'd managed to save up for, and a heart full of determination to help people fix their problems. The business started almost by accident. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly lady who lived next door to us, had been complaining for months about a leaky kitchen sink. She'd gotten estimates from 3 different plumbers, and the cheapest one was $400. Money she simply didn't have on her fixed income. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she told me one afternoon when I was helping her carry groceries. "I can't keep putting buckets under there to catch the water, but I just can't afford to pay someone to fix it." You know what I did? I asked her to show me the problem, went over to her house after dinner, crawled under that sink with a flashlight, and spent 2 hours figuring out what was wrong. Turned out it wasn't anything complicated, just a loose connection and a worn-out gasket, parts that cost maybe $10 to replace. I could have fixed it in 20 minutes. But did I just fix the sink and leave? Of course not. I spent the entire next day not only fixing her sink, but also replacing her leaky bathroom faucet, tightening all the loose handles on her cabinets and drawers, fixing her garbage disposal that had been making weird noises for months, and even installing a new light fixture in her hallway because the old one was flickering and I was worried it might be a fire hazard. When she tried to pay me, I told her the parts had only cost $10, so that's all she owed me. "But Darius, honey, you worked here all day. You should let me pay you for your time." "Mrs. Patterson, you've been bringing me fresh baked cookies since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. We'll call it even." Word got around the neighborhood that Darius Williams had fixed Mrs. Patterson's entire kitchen for $10 and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. Pretty soon, I had more requests for help than I could handle. And every single time, I did the same thing. Someone would call with a small problem, and I'd end up fixing everything else I could find wrong with their house. Someone would ask for a simple repair, and I'd spend hours doing work they hadn't even asked for, just because I could see it needed to be done. I was charging people maybe a third of what professional contractors charged, and doing twice as much work. Sometimes I'd spend an entire Saturday at someone's house and walk away with $30, barely enough to cover the cost of materials. But you know what? I was happy. I was helping people, solving their problems, making their lives better. That felt more important than making money. The business grew because people trusted me. They knew that if Darius Williams came to work on their house, he'd do the job right, he'd clean up after himself, and he'd treat their home like it was his own. He knew that he wouldn't try to sell them expensive solutions to simple problems, wouldn't disappear in the middle of a job, wouldn't charge them for work that didn't need to be done. More importantly, they knew that if they were struggling financially, Darius would find a way to help them anyway. Payment plans, discounted rates, sometimes just doing the work for free because he knew it needed to be done and they couldn't afford it. That's the kind of person I was. That's the kind of business I was trying to build. Not just a way to make money, but a way to serve my community, to help people who were struggling the same way my family had struggled when I was growing up. And that's when I met Shanice. Oh, Shanice. Even now, 20 years later, I can close my eyes and see her exactly the way she looked that first day I walked into the bank to open my business account. Honey-colored skin that seemed to glow from within, long black hair that moved like silk when she turned her head, and the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen in my 23 years of life. She was sitting behind the customer service desk wearing a navy blue business suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, looking like she belonged in some fancy office building downtown instead of a neighborhood bank branch. When she looked up at me, this sweaty, paint-splattered handyman in work boots and torn jeans, I expected to see judgment, maybe disgust. Instead, she smiled. And when Shanice smiled, it was like the sun coming out after a week of rain. "Good morning," she said in a voice like warm honey. "How can I help you today?" I stood there for what felt like 5 minutes, just staring at her like some kind of fool, trying to remember how to form words. I need to open an account for my business. I have a business." "That's wonderful," she said, and I swear she meant it. "What kind of business?" "Handyman services, home repair maintenance, that kind of thing." "And you're looking to open a business checking account?" "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." She laughed. Not a mean laugh, not like she was making fun of me, but a genuine, delighted laugh that made me feel like maybe I'd said something clever instead of just stumbling over my own tongue. "Well, let's get you set up then. I'm Shanice, by the way." "Darius." "I'm Darius." "It's nice to meet you, Darius." We spent the next hour filling out paperwork and setting up my account, but it could have taken 5 minutes for all I cared. I was completely mesmerized by this woman. The way she moved, the way she talked, the way she seemed genuinely interested in my little business and my plans for the future. When we finished with all the banking business, I did something that surprised both of us. If you're not too busy, would you maybe like to get some coffee sometime?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I was sure she was going to say no. Why would a beautiful, educated woman who worked in a bank want to go out with a guy who showed up covered in sawdust and paint? "I'd like that," she said. I walked out that bank feeling like I could conquer the world. We had coffee the next Saturday morning, and it was the most amazing 3 hours of my life. Shanice was everything I'd dreamed of in a woman. Smart, funny, ambitious, sophisticated.
She told me about her plans to go back to school for her MBA, about her dreams of working in corporate finance, about all the places she wanted to travel and things she wanted to see. And she seemed genuinely interested in my dreams too. Asked about my business, about my goals for expansion, about what I hoped to accomplish in the construction industry. Made me feel like my little handyman operation was something important, something worth pursuing. We started dating, and I was completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with her. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs that should have told me exactly who Shanice really was. But when you're 23 years old and in love for the first time in your life, you ignore red flags that are big enough to cover a football field. Like how she never wanted to come to my apartment. It wasn't much, a tiny one-bedroom place above Mrs. Patterson's garage, but it was clean and comfortable and mine. But every time I suggested we stay in and watch a movie or cook dinner together, Shanice would get this look on her face like I'd suggested we eat garbage. "Let's go out instead," she'd always say. "There's this new restaurant I've been wanting to try." And the restaurants she wanted to try were never the kind of places I could comfortably afford. Not fancy, but nice enough that I'd have to work extra jobs just to pay for dinner without dipping into my business savings. But I did it anyway, because making Shanice happy felt more important than anything else in the world. She'd get upset when I suggested we go somewhere less expensive, or when I'd mentioned that money was tight and maybe we could find something more budget-friendly. "I just thought we could try somewhere nice for once," she'd say, and somehow I'd end up feeling guilty for not being able to afford whatever she had her heart set on. There were other signs too. How she'd disappear for days at a time without explanation, then come back with vague excuses about visiting family or dealing with work stuff. How she never seemed to want to talk about her past, her family, or her life before we met. How she'd ask detailed questions about my business, how much money I was making, how many customers I had, what my plans were for the future, but always in a way that seemed like genuine interest instead of calculation. The biggest red flag, though, was how she treated other people. Waitresses, cashiers, gas station attendants, anyone she considered beneath her notice. She wasn't mean exactly, but she was dismissive, like they weren't quite real people, just obstacles between her and whatever she wanted. I should have paid attention to that. Should have realized that someone who treats service workers badly will eventually treat you badly too, once you stop being useful to them. But I was young and in love and stupid, and when she said yes to my proposal after 2 years of dating, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. The proposal itself was everything I'd dreamed it would be. I'd saved for months to buy her a ring. Not a huge diamond, because I couldn't afford that, but something beautiful that I thought she'd be proud to wear. I took her to the same restaurant where we'd had our first real date, got down on one knee right there in front of everyone, and asked her to marry me. "Yes," she said before I even finished asking the question. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." She cried tears of joy, I cried tears of relief, and everyone in the restaurant applauded. It was perfect. We got married at Mount Olive Baptist Church on a beautiful Saturday in June. Small ceremony, maybe 50 people, but it felt like the beginning of everything I'd ever dreamed of. Shanice looked absolutely stunning in her white dress, a dress that cost more than I made in 2 months, but I didn't complain because it was her special day. And when she said "I do," I believed with all my heart that we were going to build a life together that would make all the struggles worthwhile. For 6 months, everything was perfect. We moved into a little house I'd managed to save up enough to buy. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom starter home with good bones and a yard big enough for the kids we planned to have someday. I was working 14-hour days building my business, taking on bigger and more complex projects, starting to make real money for the first time in my life. But I didn't mind the long hours because I was building something for us, for our future, for our family. Every job I completed, every satisfied customer, every dollar I earned felt like another step toward the life we'd planned together. Shanice seemed happy too at first. She decorated our little house with care and style, talked about her plans to go back to school once we got more settled, made friends with some of the other young wives in our neighborhood. We'd spend our evenings planning our future, where we wanted to live eventually, how many kids we wanted to have, what we'd name them, what kind of life we wanted to build together. I thought we were on the same page. I thought we wanted the same things. I was so wrong. The first crack in our perfect life appeared when my business started slowing down. Not dramatically, just the normal seasonal lull that happens in construction during the winter months. I'd been through it before, knew it was temporary, and had saved enough money to carry us through the slow period. But Shanice didn't see it that way. "Why aren't you getting as many calls?" she asked one evening when I came home early because I'd finished my only job for the day. "It's just the season, baby. People don't think about home improvements when it's cold outside. Things will pick up in the spring." "But what if they don't? What if those customers decide to use someone else?" "They won't. I've built good relationships with these people. They trust me." "Trust doesn't pay bills, Darius." The way she said it, my stomach dropped, like she was already calculating whether I was worth staying married to. But I pushed those thoughts aside, told myself I was being paranoid. This was my wife, the woman who'd promised to love me for better or worse. She was just worried about our financial security, which was natural and reasonable. Then 2008 happened. You remember the recession, right? When the entire economy collapsed like a house of cards and millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, their entire way of life practically overnight?
The construction industry got hit harder than almost any other sector. People who were worried about losing their houses weren't thinking about renovating their kitchens. People who were struggling to pay for groceries weren't calling handymen to fix their leaky faucets. My phone went from ringing constantly to barely ringing at all. The jobs I did manage to get were smaller, less profitable, often from customers who couldn't pay the full amount up front and needed payment plans just to afford basic repairs. And because I understood what it meant to struggle, because I remembered what it felt like to need help and not be able to afford it, I kept working anyway, cut my prices in half, accepted whatever payment terms customers could manage, sometimes did work for free, because I could see that families were hurting and I couldn't just let their problems go unfixed. Within 6 months, I'd gone from running a successful business to struggling to pay my own bills. The house payment came due, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have the money. Then the truck payment. Then all the credit cards I'd used to buy tools and materials when business was good, and I thought it would stay good forever. I tried everything I could think of to turn things around. Expanded my service area, driving 2 hours each way for jobs that barely covered the cost of gas. Started offering services I'd never done before, plumbing, electrical work, anything that might bring in a few more dollars. Lowered my prices even further, to the point where I was sometimes losing money on jobs just to keep my name out there. But it wasn't enough. The whole economy was falling apart, and no amount of hard work or determination could change that. That's when I made the mistake of being honest with Shanice about how bad things really were. It was a Tuesday morning in November, and we were sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread out like evidence at a crime scene. I'd been putting off this conversation for weeks, hoping things would turn around, hoping I'd find a way to fix our problems without having to admit how dire our situation had become. But the mortgage payment was due in 3 days, and I was $800 short. "Shanice, we need to talk about our finances." She looked up from her coffee with an expression I'd never seen before. Not concern, not worry, but something that looked almost like disgust. "What about him?" "We're in trouble. Real trouble."
I haven't been getting enough work to cover all our expenses, and we're behind on several bills." "How behind?" I took a deep breath. "We might lose the house." The silence that followed was the longest 30 seconds of my life. "What do you mean we might lose the house?" "I mean, if I can't make the mortgage payment by Friday, the bank is going to start foreclosure proceedings." She stared at me like I just told her I had 6 months to live. "How did you let this happen?" "I didn't let it happen, Shanice. The whole economy collapsed. Nobody's spending money on home repairs right now. I'm doing everything I can to keep us afloat. Obviously not everything, or we wouldn't be in this situation." The blame in her voice hit me like a slap in the face. "I've been working 16-hour days, driving hundreds of miles looking for work, taking jobs that barely pay for materials just to keep money coming in. I don't know what else you want me to do. I want you to figure it out. I want you to fix this. That's what men do. They take care of their responsibilities." I spent the rest of that day making phone calls, trying to negotiate with creditors, looking for any possible solution to our financial crisis. I called the mortgage company and begged for an extension. I contacted every customer who owed me money and asked if it could pay even a portion of what they owed. I even swallowed my pride and applied for jobs at construction companies that I'd always considered beneath my skill level. Nothing worked. That evening, when I came home exhausted and defeated, I found Shanice in our bedroom, packing a suitcase. "Baby, what are you doing?" She didn't even look up, just kept folding clothes and placing them carefully in the suitcase like she was preparing for a business trip. "I'm leaving." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Leaving? Where are you going?" "I'm going to stay with my sister until I can figure out what to do next." "What to do next, Shanice? We're married. We're supposed to figure this out together." She finally looked at me, and the expression on her face was something I'll never forget. Not anger, not worry, but something that looked almost like disgust. "I didn't sign up for this, Darius." "Sign up for what? Marriage? For better or worse, remember?" "I signed up to marry a man who had his life together, someone who could provide for me, who could give me the kind of life I deserve, not someone who can't even keep his own house." "This is temporary, Shanice. The economy will turn around. Business will pick up again. We just have to get through this rough patch together." "Together?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What exactly are we going to do together? Lose the house together? Ruin our credit together? Be poor together?" "We're not poor. We're just going through a hard time." "I don't do hard times, Darius, and I don't do poor." She zipped up the suitcase and headed for the door. "Shanice, please don't do this. I love you. We can work this out." She stopped at the doorway and turned back to look at me one last time. Love doesn't pay bills, and it doesn't make up for failure. And then she was gone. I stood in our bedroom, staring at the empty space where she had been, trying to process what had just happened. The woman I'd loved with every fiber of my being, the woman I'd worked myself to exhaustion trying to provide for, the woman who had promised to love me forever, had just walked out because I was temporarily struggling financially. But she wasn't just leaving. She was taking everything valuable with her. The jewelry I'd bought her, the expensive electronics we'd purchased together, even the good silverware and dishes from our wedding registry. By morning, our little house looked like it had been robbed by someone who had very specific taste in what was worth stealing. She left me a note on the kitchen counter. Not a letter. Not an explanation, not even an apology, just a piece of paper that said she'd filed for divorce and I shouldn't try to contact her. Just like that. 24 hours after I'd been honest with her about our financial problems, the woman who'd promised to love me forever decided I wasn't worth sticking around for when the money ran out. That night, sitting alone in my empty house with nothing but my thoughts and a mountain of debt, I cried harder than I'd cried since I was a little boy.
Not just because I'd lost my wife, but because I realized how completely alone I was in the world. But I still had family, right? I still had all those people I'd helped over the years, all those family members who'd come to me when they needed something. Surely they'd remember all those times I'd been there for them. Surely they'd want to help me the way I'd always helped them. The next morning, with my hands shaking from exhaustion and desperation, I called my mama. Mama, I'm in trouble. Shanice left me. I'm about to lose the house, and I don't know what to do. I need help. There was silence on the other end for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she sighed, this long, disappointed sound that made my heart sink into my stomach. Darius, baby, I wish I could help you, but I got my own problems right now. Harold's been staying here and we're barely making ends meet ourselves. You know how expensive everything is these days. Harold, her boyfriend of 3 months, a man she barely knew, was more important than her son who was about to be homeless. Mama, I'm not asking for money. Maybe I could just stay with you for a few weeks, just until I figure something out? Honey, you know my apartment is small, and with Harold here, it just wouldn't be appropriate. There's barely enough room for 2 people as it is. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother, the woman who'd raised me to believe that family comes first no matter what, was telling me there wasn't room in her apartment for her homeless son. Mama, I helped you move into that apartment. I paid your deposit when you couldn't afford it. I've given you money every month for 3 years to help with expenses. And now you can't give me a place to sleep for a few nights? Now don't you take that tone with me, Darius. I raised you better than that. And yes, you helped me some, but I never asked you to do all that. You did it because you wanted to. Because I wanted to. Like my generosity had been some kind of selfish act instead of genuine love and concern for her welfare. Fine, Mama. I understand. But if you hear of anyone who needs some work done, any kind of work at all, please let me know. I'm willing to do anything to keep from losing everything. I will, baby, and I'll pray for you. The Lord will provide. You'll see. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. My own mother had turned me away in my darkest hour. But maybe she really didn't have room. Maybe Harold really was a complication she couldn't deal with right now. Maybe the other people in my life would be different. I started calling everyone else, every family member I'd ever helped over the years, every friend I'd ever been there for when they needed support, every person who'd ever told me they appreciated what I'd done for them. My older brother Terrell, who I'd bailed out of jail more times than I could count. Man, I wish I could help you out, but I got my own situation to deal with right now. You know how it is. Can't give what you don't have. My younger brother Jamal, who I paid for to finish high school in a better district. Dee, that's rough, man. I feel for you. I really do. But I'm just getting by myself. Maybe things will turn around soon. My cousin Malik, who I gave my coat money to that Christmas when his daughter was supposedly sick. Damn, Darius, that's messed up about Shanice. But you know, times are tough for everybody right now. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do. My Aunt Brenda, who I kept fed and housed during her worst times. Honey, I'm praying for you. Have you tried calling the church? They might have some kind of program for people in your situation. One after another, every single person I called had a reason why they couldn't help. Not wouldn't, couldn't. Amazing how quickly can't becomes won't when you're the one asking instead of giving. I lost everything. The house went into foreclosure, the truck got repossessed, the business collapsed because I couldn't afford to replace tools that got stolen and couldn't buy materials for jobs without money up front. I ended up sleeping in my car behind a gas station, washing dishes at an all-night diner for minimum wage, just so I could afford to eat once a day. You want to know the worst part about being homeless? The absolute worst part that no one talks about? It's how invisible you become. People who used to shake my hand and invite me to their barbecues would cross the street when they saw me coming. Like poverty was contagious, like my failure might rub off on them if they got too close. Former customers who'd praised my work and promised to recommend me to their friends would look right through me when I ran into them in the grocery store. Like I'd never existed, like I'd never helped them, like I was just some random homeless guy who didn't deserve acknowledgement. But there were others, complete strangers who had no reason to care about me, who showed me more kindness in my darkest hour than my own family ever had. Like Eugene, the construction foreman who found me sleeping in my car behind a hardware store one morning and, instead of calling the police, knocked on my window and offered me day labor. "You look like you know your way around tools," he said, looking at my calloused hands and the toolbox in the back of my car. "You willing to work hard?" "Sir, I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired," I told him, and I meant every word. Eugene became more than just a boss. He became the father figure I'd never had. He paid me in cash at the end of every day, never asked questions about why I was sleeping in my car, and when I finally saved enough to rent a tiny efficiency apartment, he helped me move my few belongings. "A man's gotta have a place to call home," he said, refusing to let me pay him for the gas money. "Builds character to know where you belong." Like Miss Ruby at the all-night diner where I washed dishes. She was maybe 65 years old, had been working there for 30 years, and had probably seen every kind of hard luck story you could imagine. But she always made sure there was extra food for me to take home. Always slipped me an extra $10 or $20 when she thought I needed it most. "Baby, I've been where you are," she told me one night when I was too proud to accept her generosity. "Somebody helped me when I needed it, and now I'm helping you. That's how the world's supposed to work." Like Pastor Williams at the church downtown, who let me use their shower facilities and never once made me feel ashamed about needing help. "Son, we all fall down sometimes," he said. "What matters isn't how far you fall, it's whether you get back up." These people owed me nothing, had never benefited from my generosity, never asked me for anything, never even knew me before I showed up broken and desperate at their door. But they helped me anyway, because that's what good people do. They helped me because they recognized something that my own family had forgotten, that helping others isn't about what you can get in return. It's about recognizing that we're all just one bad break away from needing help ourselves. It took me 3 years to get back on my feet. 3 years of working multiple jobs, saving every penny, slowly rebuilding what I'd lost from the ground up. But this time, I was smarter. This time, I was more careful about who I trusted and what I was willing to sacrifice for others. I started my handyman business again, but with a different approach. Instead of trying to help everyone regardless of their ability to pay, I focused on customers who could actually afford my services. Instead of doing charity work that left me broke, I charged fair prices for quality work and stuck to my boundaries. And you know what happened? My business exploded. Turns out, when you focus on serving customers who value your work and can afford to pay for it, instead of trying to help everyone for free, you actually make money. Who would have thought? Within 2 years, I was running the most successful handyman business in Memphis. Within 5 years, I had crews working across 3 states. Within 10 years, I was worth more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. I developed what I called the Community Care Program, a way to provide affordable maintenance services to entire neighborhoods instead of just individual customers. Property management companies started hiring me to maintain their portfolios. Housing authorities brought me in to help with public housing maintenance. Insurance companies began recommending me because regular maintenance meant fewer expensive claims. The business model was so successful that I started acquiring other companies, construction firms, landscaping businesses, property management operations. Before I knew it, I wasn't just running a handyman service anymore, I was building an empire. And that's when my family suddenly remembered my phone number. Mama was the first to call, sweet as honey, telling me how proud she was of her successful son. "Baby, I've been hearing wonderful things about your business. People are saying you're doing real good for yourself." "I'm doing all right, Mama." "Well, I was thinking maybe we could spend some time together. It's been too long since I seen my boy. Harold and I broke up, so I got plenty of room now if you ever want to come visit." Harold was gone, and suddenly there was room for me again. What a coincidence. "And I was also thinking that maybe you could help me with a little situation I got going on. My rent went up, and it's getting hard to make ends meet on my fixed income." And there it was. Not, "I missed you." Not, "I'm sorry I turned you away when you needed me." Not, "I realized I made a terrible mistake." Just, "Can you help me with money?" Against every instinct I had, against every lesson I'd learned during those 3 years of homelessness and desperation, I started helping them again. Because they were family. Because I've been raised to believe that family comes first no matter what. And 35 years of conditioning is hard to overcome, even when that family has proven they only see you as a resource to be exploited. Within a month of that first call from Mama, my phone was constantly ringing. Terrell needed money for legal troubles. Jamal needed help with rent. Malik needed a loan for his car payment. Aunt Brenda was facing eviction. Uncle Curtis had medical bills he couldn't afford. They all had stories. They all had emergencies. They all had crises that required immediate financial attention. And they all knew exactly how much money I was making because they'd done their research. They'd figured out what my business was worth, calculated how much they thought they could get from me before I'd say no. But here's the thing about people who see you as their personal bank account. They're never satisfied. Every check you write just proves to them that you have more money to give. Every problem you solve creates 2 new problems that require even more money to fix. Within 2 years, I was supporting more than 20 different family members and their friends, sending out tens of thousands of dollars every month to people who only called me when they needed something. Terrell's legal troubles turned into a series of increasingly expensive crises. First he needed a lawyer, then he needed money to pay fines, then he needed more money for appeals, then he needed even more money for some kind of restitution. Every time I thought I'd helped him resolve his problems, there was another emergency that required another check. Jamal's help with rent became a monthly expectation. Not a loan, not temporary assistance, but a permanent subsidy for his lifestyle. And when I suggested that maybe he should get a job or find a way to support himself, he'd give me this look like I'd suggested he climb Mount Everest naked. "Come on, Dee. You know there aren't any good jobs out there for someone without a college degree. And besides, you're making so much money now. What's a few $100s to you?" A few $100s every month, plus the few hundred for his car payment, plus the emergency money when his girlfriend needed something, plus the extra cash when he wanted to take a vacation or buy something special. It added up fast. The worst part wasn't even the money, though. The worst part was how entitled they all became. How they went from being grateful for my help to acting like my success was somehow their due.
Malik started showing up at my house, unannounced, always with some new scheme or investment opportunity that he needed me to fund. "Dee, you gotta hear about this business idea I got. It's gonna make us both rich." Us both. Like he was gonna contribute something other than the idea and the expectation that I'd pay for everything. When I'd politely declined to fund his latest get-rich-quick scheme, he'd get upset, accusatory. "Man, I thought family was supposed to help each other. I thought you cared about seeing your own cousin succeed." Aunt Brenda started treating me like her personal social worker. Every problem her family had became my problem to solve. Her kids needed school supplies, call Darius. Her car needed repairs, call Darius. Her electricity got cut off, call Darius. And it wasn't just my immediate family anymore. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years started reaching out. Friends of family members who'd heard I was generous began calling with sob stories. Even people I'd never met started contacting me, claiming some distant family connection as justification for why I should help them with their problems. You probably don't remember me, but I'm Brenda's sister-in-law's cousin, and I heard you sometimes help family members who are going through hard times. The most heartbreaking part was how my generosity seemed to make their problems worse instead of better. Every time I gave someone money to solve a crisis, they'd end up in a bigger crisis a month later. Every time I helped them avoid consequences for their bad decisions, they'd make even worse decisions because they knew Darius would bail them out. I was enabling them, creating a cycle of dependency that was destroying any chance they had of learning to solve their own problems. But I couldn't seem to stop myself from trying to help. Then Mama did something that finally opened my eyes to what was really happening. She tried to get me back together with Shanice. "You know, baby," she said during one of our monthly dinners, "I've been thinking about you and that marriage situation." "What marriage situation, Mama? I'm divorced. Have been for years." "I know, but you're a successful man now. You need a good woman by your side. Someone who understands what it means to be married to a man of your position." Something in her tone made me pay attention. The way she said position, like I was some kind of prize to be won. "What are you getting at, Mama?" "Well, I've been talking to Brenda's mama at church, and it turns out Shanice has been asking about you. Wants to know how you're doing, whether you ever think about the old days." I put down my fork and stared at her. "Mama, please tell me you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting." "I'm just saying, that girl made some mistakes when y'all were young, but she's grown up now, and she sees what a good man you turned out to be. Maybe y'all could work things out." "Mama, that woman left me when I had nothing, divorced me when I was homeless, told me she didn't do poor, and walked out when I needed her most. And now you want me to take her back because I have money?" "People change, Darius. People mature. And besides, you're not getting any younger. You need someone to settle down with, maybe have some children. You can't just work all the time." The audacity of it took my breath away. My own mother thought it was perfectly reasonable for me to take back the woman who had abandoned me in my darkest hour just because she might be interested now that I was rich. "Mama, I wouldn't take Shanice back if she was the last woman on earth." "Now don't be so stubborn, baby. Think about it practically. She's educated, she's pretty, she knows how to handle herself in social situations. She'd be good for your image." Good for my image. Like my wife should be a business accessory instead of someone who actually loved me. "This conversation is over, Mama." But she didn't give up. Over the next several months, she kept bringing up Shanice in our conversations, always in little ways, always making it seem casual. I saw Shanice's mama at the grocery store. She said Shanice is doing real well for herself, but she's still single. Says she learned a lot from her mistakes and wishes she could have another chance to prove how much she's grown. Funny thing, Shanice was at the bank the other day when I was making my deposit, and she asked about you, wanted to know if you were happy, if you'd found someone special. I told her you were too focused on work to think about relationships right now. Each time, I told Mama the same thing. I wasn't interested in reconnecting with Shanice. I didn't want to hear about her, and I'd appreciate it if she'd stop bringing up my ex-wife in our conversations. But she kept
pushing, kept trying different angles, different approaches, different ways to convince me that the woman who'd shown me exactly who she was when I needed her most somehow deserved my forgiveness. That's when I finally started setting boundaries with my family. I told Mama I wasn't getting back with Shanice and I wasn't going to discuss it anymore. I cut back on the money I was giving to family members who only contacted me when they needed something. I started saying no to requests that seemed unreasonable or manipulative. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Angry phone calls accusing me of forgetting where I came from, guilt trips about how I was abandoning my family now that I was successful, text messages calling me selfish and ungrateful. "You think you too good for your own family now?" Terrell demanded during one particularly heated conversation. "It's not about thinking I'm too good for anyone. It's about not wanting to be treated like a bank account instead of a human being." Man, that's cold. After everything we've been through together, after all the times I've been there for you. When, Terrell, when exactly have you been there for me? Because I remember being homeless and calling you for help, and you couldn't spare a couch for me to sleep on. I remember asking you for work when I was desperate, and you were too busy to even return my calls. That was different. We all had our own problems back then. But when you have problems, I'm supposed to drop everything and solve them with my checkbook? We're family, Dee. That's what family does. No, Terrell. Family doesn't just take. Family gives back, too. Family is there for each other during the bad times, not just when it's convenient. But he couldn't see it. None of them could see it. To them, my success was just proof that I had more resources to share, not something I'd earned through years of hard work and sacrifice.
The guilt trips got more intense after that. Mama started having health scares that required immediate medical attention and immediate payment for medical bills that insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. "Baby, I hate to worry you, but I've been having these chest pains, and the doctor wants to run some expensive tests. My insurance is saying they might not cover all of it." Jamal started having crises that always seemed to happen right around the time his rent was due. "Dee, I'm in real trouble here. My boss cut my hours, and I don't know how I'm going to make rent this month. If I get evicted, I don't know where I'm going to go." Other family members started showing up at my house unannounced, always with some sob story about why they needed money right now, today, this very minute, or their whole world would fall apart. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency, Darius, but I gotta have this money by tomorrow, or they're gonna repossess my car, and if I lose my car, I lose my job." But I held firm. For the first time in my adult life, I put my own needs ahead of everyone else's demands. The emotional manipulation got worse before it got better. Family members started using my success against me, making me feel guilty for having money when they were struggling. "Must be nice to have so much money you don't even care about your own family anymore. I guess when you get rich, you forget what it's like to need help. We always knew you'd change once you made it big, just didn't think you'd turn your back on the people who raised you." But I'd learned something important during those 3 years of homelessness. The people who really care about you don't disappear when times get tough, and the people who only show up when you're successful don't really care about you at all. Then something happened that could have destroyed everything I'd built, and it showed me exactly what my family really thought of me. I was driving home from a job site one evening when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my truck. The impact was so severe that I was unconscious for 3 days and hospitalized for 2 weeks with a concussion, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. You know what my family's first concern was when they heard about my accident? Not whether I was going to be okay, not whether I needed anything during my recovery, not whether there was anything they could do to help me get back on my feet. Their first concern was getting access to my bank accounts. Darius might not be able to make decisions for himself right now. Terrell told my personal assistant, Lawrence. As his next of kin, I think I should probably have power of attorney to handle his finances while he recovers. The family needs to make sure his bills are getting paid and his business is running smoothly. We should probably get access to his accounts just to make sure everything is taken care of properly. Thank God for Lawrence. He'd worked for me for 5 years and understood exactly what kind of people my family were. Mr. Williams left very specific instructions about his accounts, Lawrence told them. Only he can authorize any changes, and he's perfectly capable of making his own decisions. But he's been unconscious for 3 days. What if he has brain damage or something? What if he can't handle his own affairs anymore? Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But right now, he's conscious, alert, and fully competent. His accounts remain under his control. When I was well enough to understand what had happened, Lawrence filled me in on every conversation, every attempt they'd made to get their hands on my money while I was lying unconscious in a hospital bed. My own family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had seen my accident not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. They'd spent more time trying to figure out how to access my bank accounts than they'd spent worrying about whether I was going to survive. That's when I made the hardest decision of my adult life. I cut them off. Completely. Changed my phone numbers, moved to a different house in a different city, hired security to make sure they couldn't just show up unannounced. I was done being their bank account, done being their safety net, done enabling their bad decisions with my hard-earned money. The guilt was overwhelming at first. 35 years of being taught that family comes first is hard to overcome, even when that family has proven over and over again that they only see you as a resource to be exploited. But you know what? For the first time in my adult life, I had peace. For the first time, I could focus on building my business without constantly worrying about who was going to need money next, who was going to have the next crisis that required my immediate financial attention. My company exploded. Without the constant drain of supporting everyone else's bad decisions, I could reinvest in my business, take bigger risks, pursue opportunities I'd never been able to afford before. Within 3 years, I'd gone from running a successful regional company to building a national empire. Construction, property management, real estate development, I had my fingers in every pie, and every pie was making serious money. That's when I moved to Charlotte and met Simone. God in heaven, that woman was everything I never knew I was looking for. Smart, beautiful, successful in her own right, and most importantly, she didn't need my money. She had her own consulting business, her own goals, her own life that she'd built without any help from me. We met at a business conference in Atlanta, started talking about sustainable construction practices, and ended up talking until sunrise about everything and nothing. When she looked at me, she saw Darius the person, not Darius the bank account. But let me tell you the real story of how we met, because it was nothing like the fairy tale I thought it was at the time. I was at the Southeast Construction and Development Conference, one of those massive events where thousands of people in the industry gather to network, learn about new technologies, and make business connections. I'd been going to these conferences for years, but usually I kept to myself, attended the sessions that interested me, and went back to my hotel room early. This time was different. I was sitting in a session about green building practices when this woman stood up during the Q&A period and asked the most intelligent question I'd heard all day. She challenged the speaker's assumptions about cost versus environmental benefit, citing specific studies and data that clearly showed she knew what she was talking about. She was wearing a navy blue business suit that was professional but flattering, and when she spoke, everyone in the room paid attention. Not just because she was beautiful, which she absolutely was, but because she commanded respect through her knowledge and expertise.
After the session ended, I found myself walking towards her, something I never would have done before. I was usually too shy, too worried about being rejected, too concerned that someone would see me as just another wealthy businessman trying to impress a pretty woman. "Excuse me," I said as she was packing up her notes. "I wanted to tell you that was an excellent question you asked. I don't think I've ever heard anyone challenge Dr. Peterson's cost analysis quite so effectively." She looked up and smiled, and I swear the whole room got brighter.
Thank you. I've been following his research for years, and while I respect his work, I think he underestimates the long-term savings of sustainable building practices. Too many people in this industry are still focused on upfront costs rather than lifetime value. We ended up talking for 3 hours. Not about business at first, but about everything. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled, childhood memories, dreams for the future. She told me about growing up in a small town in North Carolina, how she'd worked her way through college and graduate school, how she'd started her consulting business from nothing and built it into something successful. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't opened up to anyone in years. I told her about my childhood in Memphis, about building my business from the ground up, about the lessons I'd learned about trusting people and the importance of genuine relationships. What I didn't tell her about, not that first night, was my family, or Shanice, or any of the betrayals I'd survived. Those were stories for later, after I knew her better, after I was sure she was someone I could trust with my pain. "Would you like to have dinner?" I asked as the conference center was closing down around us. "I'd love to," she said. We went to a little Italian restaurant near her hotel. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet conversation. She insisted on paying for her own meal, which surprised me. Most women I dated expected me to pay for everything, but Simone seemed genuinely uncomfortable when I offered. "I'm perfectly capable of buying my own dinner," she said with a laugh. "Besides, this was my idea as much as yours." That should have been my first clue that she was different from every other woman I had ever been interested in. But at the time, I thought it was just her being polite. We talked until the restaurant closed, then walked around downtown Atlanta for another hour, just enjoying each other's company. When I finally walked her back to her hotel, I felt like I was floating on air. "I'd really like to see you again," I told her. "I'd like that too. But I should probably warn you, I live in Atlanta, and I travel a lot for work. I'm not looking for anything complicated." "Neither am I," I lied. The truth was, I was already thinking about how often I could find excuses to visit Atlanta. We exchanged phone numbers, and I drove back to Charlotte the next day, thinking about her smile, her laugh, the way she'd challenged my assumptions about sustainable building without making me feel stupid or inadequate. I called her 3 days later. "Darius, I was hoping you'd call. How was the drive back to Charlotte?" We talked for 2 hours. About the conference, about our work, about a documentary she'd watched about climate change, about a book I'd read on business ethics. Easy, comfortable conversation that made me forget about all the stress and complications in my life. I called her again 2 days after that, then she called me, then I called her again. Within 2 weeks, we were talking every day. Not long calls at first, just checking in, sharing something funny that had happened, asking for advice about work projects. But gradually the calls got longer, more personal, more important. "I have to be honest with you about something," I told her during one of our late-night conversations, about a month after we'd met. "Okay," she said, and I could hear the caution in her voice. "What is it?" "I was married before. It ended badly. Really badly. And it's made me careful about trusting people." "What happened?" So I told her about Shanice, about how she'd left me when I lost everything in the recession, about how she'd treated our marriage like a business arrangement that wasn't profitable anymore, and about how it had taken me years to recover from the betrayal. "I'm sorry," Simone said when I finished. "That must have been devastating."
It was. But it also taught me some important lessons about what I want in a partner. I want someone who's with me because they choose to be, not because of what I can provide for them. That's all anyone should want. Real relationships aren't about what you can get from someone else. They're about what you can build together. That's when I knew I was falling in love with her. Not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like she couldn't imagine wanting anything else. We kept talking every day for 6 months. I visited Atlanta twice. She came to Charlotte once. Each time we spent together convinced me that she was everything I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. Simone was independent in a way that Shanice had never been. She had her own career, her own friends, her own interests that had nothing to do with me. When we went out to dinner, she insisted on paying half the check. When I offered to buy her expensive gifts, she politely declined and suggested we do something together instead. I don't need you to buy me things, Darius. I like spending time with you because of who you are, not because of what you can afford. She was also kind in a way that seemed genuine rather than calculated. I watched her interact with waitresses, hotel staff, taxi drivers, always polite, always respectful, always treating people like human beings rather than servants. The way she treated people who couldn't do anything for her told me more about her character than anything she could have said directly. When she finally agreed to move to Charlotte, it was because her consulting business had grown to the point where she could work from anywhere, and because we both acknowledged that the long-distance relationship wasn't sustainable if we were serious about building something together. I want to be clear about something, she said when we talked about her moving. I'm not moving to Charlotte to be supported by you. I'm moving to Charlotte to be with you. I'll still have my own work, my own income, my own life. I just want to share it with you. She found her own apartment at first, insisted on paying her own rent and utilities, kept her own bank accounts and credit cards. Even after we'd been living in the same city for 6 months, she maintained her financial independence. It was during those months that I really fell in love with her, not just because of her beauty or her intelligence, but because of her integrity. The way she treated people, the way she approached problems, the way she talked about her goals and dreams. She wanted to use her consulting business to help companies reduce their environmental impact while also saving money. She talked about sustainability not as a luxury for wealthy companies, but as a necessity for everyone, rich and poor alike. The planet doesn't care how much money you have, she said during one of our conversations about her work. Climate change affects everyone, so the solutions have to be accessible to everyone. That's when I knew she was someone I wanted to spend my life with, not just because I loved her, but because I respected her. Because she was trying to make the world better in her own way, just like I was trying to do with my business and my charitable work. The proposal took me months to plan. Not because I wasn't sure. I'd been sure for a long time that I wanted to marry her. But because I was terrified of making the same mistake I'd made with Shanice. What if I was wrong about Simone? What if her independence was an act, and she was actually just as interested in my money as Shanice had been? What if I was being naive again, trusting someone who would eventually betray me? I spent weeks watching her interactions with other people, looking for signs that she might not be who I thought she was. I had background checks run, discreetly, through my lawyer, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed to be absolutely sure. Everything checked out. She was exactly who she said she was, a successful businesswoman from North Carolina who'd built her company through hard work and determination. No hidden debts, no criminal history, no suspicious relationships or financial entanglements. More importantly, she never asked me for money, never suggested expensive vacations, never hinted about jewelry or clothes or cars she wanted me to buy for her. When we went out, she insisted on paying her share. When we talked about the future, it was about the work we wanted to do together, not the lifestyle my money could provide.
I proposed on a Saturday evening in May, at the same restaurant where we'd had our first dinner in Atlanta. I'd flown us both back there specifically for the occasion, though she didn't know that was why we were making the trip. "Simone," I said as we finished our dessert, "there's something I need to tell you." "Okay," she said, smiling. "You look nervous. Is everything all right?" "I'm more than nervous. I'm terrified. But I need to say this." I got down on one knee right there in the restaurant, pulled out the ring I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks, and looked into her eyes. "I love you. Not just because you're beautiful, or smart, or successful, but because you're good. Because you make me want to be a better person. Because when I imagine my future, I can't imagine it without you." She was already crying. "Simone, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said before I even finished asking the question. "Yes, of course, yes." Everyone in the restaurant applauded, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with exactly the right person. Our wedding was everything my marriage to Shanice hadn't been. Small, intimate, focused on the commitment we were making to each other, rather than the impression we were trying to make on other people. We were married at a small church in Charlotte, surrounded by maybe 50 people who actually cared about us as individuals. Simone's family came from North Carolina, her parents, her sister Sarah, a few cousins who'd been important in her life. My guest list was smaller. Lawrence, my assistant, who'd become like family to me, Eugene from my construction days, a few business associates who'd become genuine friends over the years. No one from my biological family was invited. After everything they'd put me through, after their attempt to manipulate me through my accident, I'd made the decision to build my life around people who'd earned my trust, rather than people who happened to share my DNA. Simone understood that decision completely. She'd seen how my family had treated me, and she supported my choice to protect my peace and happiness by keeping toxic people out of my life. "Family isn't just about blood," she said when we were planning the wedding. "Family is about people who love you unconditionally, who support your dreams, who celebrate your successes, and comfort you during your failures. You have family. It's just not the people you were born to." The ceremony itself was simple and beautiful. We wrote our own vows, promising not just to love each other, but to grow together, to challenge each other to be better people, to build something meaningful with our lives. "I promise to support your dreams even when they scare me," Simone said during her vows. "I promise to tell you the truth even when it's difficult. I promise to love you not for what you can give me, but for who you are. I promise to trust you with my heart even though it's been broken before. I promise to be the man you deserve, the partner you can count on, the friend who will always be honest with you about what matters most." When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, I felt like my real life was finally beginning. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, traveling through small towns and talking about our dreams for the future. Simone wanted to expand her consulting business internationally. I wanted to use my construction empire to create more jobs in underserved communities. We talked about having children, about the kind of parents we wanted to be, about the values we wanted to pass on. "I want our kids to understand that having money is a responsibility, not just a privilege," Simone said as we sat in a cafe in Tuscany, watching the sunset. "I want them to know that their worth isn't determined by their bank account, but by how they treat other people. I want them to be generous without being naive," I said. "I want them to help people who deserve help, but to be smart enough to recognize when they're being used." We talked about building generational wealth that could be used to make a positive impact on the world, about creating a foundation that could outlast us and continue helping people long after we were gone. A year after our wedding, Simone got pregnant. I'll never forget the morning she told me. I was getting ready for work when she knocked on the bathroom door. "Darius, can you come here for a minute?" She was standing by our bed, holding something in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, what's wrong?" I asked, immediately worried that something bad had happened.
"Nothing's wrong," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Everything's perfect." She held up a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. "We're having a baby." I picked her up and spun her around the room, both of us laughing and crying and talking over each other about due dates and baby names and how we were going to tell our families. The pregnancy was everything I'd hoped it would be. Simone glowed with happiness and health, and I felt like I was walking on air every day. We spent hours talking to her belly, reading books about parenting, preparing the nursery with careful attention to every detail. When Darius Jr. was born on a snowy December morning, I held him in my arms and felt a love unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This tiny, perfect person was half me and half the woman I adored, a living symbol of the life we were building together. "He looks just like you," Simone said as we sat in the hospital room watching our son sleep in my arms. "He's got your stubborn chin," I said, making her laugh. "Good. He's going to need to be stubborn to deal with you as his father." The first year of Darius Jr.'s life was magical. Watching him grow and change every day, seeing his personality develop, experiencing the indescribable joy of being his father. It was everything I dreamed of and more.
Simone was an incredible mother. Patient, loving, intuitive about what he needed before he even knew he needed it. She took maternity leave from her consulting business but worked from home when she could, determined to maintain her professional identity even as she embraced motherhood. "I want him to see that women can be mothers and professionals," she explained, when I suggested she could take more time off. "I want him to grow up understanding that partnerships work best when both people contribute according to their abilities and interests." When Darius Jr. was 13 months old, Simone got pregnant again. "Are you sure you're ready for 2 children under 2 years old?" I asked when she told me, though I was thrilled at the prospect of expanding our family. "I'm ready for whatever God gives us," she said. "Besides, they'll be close in age. They'll always have each other." Marcus was born 11 months after his big brother, and suddenly our quiet house was filled with the beautiful chaos of 2 toddlers, diapers and bottles and toys everywhere, laughter and crying and the constant activity that comes with small children. I loved every minute of it. Coming home from work to find Simone reading to both boys, watching them play together, seeing their different personalities emerge as they grew. Darius Jr. was serious and thoughtful, already showing signs of the analytical mind he'd inherited from both of us. Marcus was outgoing and charming, always ready with a smile that could melt your heart. "We make beautiful babies," Simone said one evening as we sat on the couch watching the boys play with their blocks. "We make a beautiful family," I corrected her. And we did. For 5 years, we built what I thought was the perfect life. Simone's consulting business continued to grow, and she was able to work mostly from home, which gave her flexibility to be present for the boys while still pursuing her professional goals. My construction empire expanded into new markets, providing good jobs for thousands of people and contributing to the economic development of communities across the Southeast. We took family vacations to places that would be educational for the boys. National parks, historical sites, cities with interesting architecture and culture. We read together every night, played games, went to church as a family, created traditions and memories that I thought would last a lifetime. The boys adored their mother, and she adored them right back. She was patient when they were difficult, creative when they were bored, loving when they needed comfort. Watching her with them made me fall in love with her all over again every single day. She was also an incredible partner to me. She listened when I needed to talk about work stress, offered smart advice about business decisions, supported my charitable endeavors while pursuing her own community involvement. Most importantly, she never asked for more than I could give, never pressured me to spend money on things we didn't need, never complained about my work schedule when big projects required extra attention, never made me feel guilty for the time I spent on business or charitable activities. "I knew who you were when I married you," she said, when I apologized for missing one of Marcus's soccer games because of a crisis with a construction project. "I married a man who works hard and cares about doing things right. That's one of the things I love about you."
We talked about having more children, but decided that 2 was the right number for us. We were both in our 40s, both busy with demanding careers, and both committed to giving Darius Jr. and Marcus the attention and resources they needed to grow into good men. Quality over quantity, Simone said when we made that decision. I'd rather do an excellent job raising 2 children than spread myself too thin trying to raise more. Our life wasn't perfect. No one's life is perfect, but it was good. Really, genuinely good in a way that I'd never experienced before. We had our disagreements, our stressful moments, our challenges with the boys' behavior or our work schedules, or the general complexity of managing a household and 2 careers. But we worked through everything together. We communicated honestly about our needs and concerns. We supported each other through difficult times and celebrated together during good times. I thought we had everything we needed to be happy for the rest of our lives. That's why what happened next was so devastating, because I wasn't just losing a wife and children. I was losing the first real family I'd ever had, the first relationship built on genuine love and mutual respect, the first home that felt like a sanctuary rather than a place where I had to be on guard against manipulation and exploitation. Looking back now, I can see signs that something was wrong in the months before the restaurant incident. Small things that didn't seem significant at the time, but that formed a pattern when I put them all together. Simone had started asking more questions about my business and my finances. Not suspicious questions at first. They seemed like the natural concerns of a wife who wanted to make sure our family would be secure if something happened to me. "Have you updated your will recently?" she asked one evening as we were getting ready for bed. "Not since the boys were born. Why?" "I was just thinking that we should probably make sure everything is current. Our assets have grown, the boys are older. It might be worth reviewing to make sure we have everything structured properly." That seemed reasonable. We made an appointment with our estate attorney and updated our wills, making sure that Simone would have access to everything she needed to take care of the boys if something happened to me. "What about life insurance?" she asked a few weeks later. "Do you have enough coverage to maintain our lifestyle if you're not here?" "I have some coverage, but we could probably increase it. Let me talk to my insurance agent." I increased my life insurance coverage to $20 million, making Simone the primary beneficiary. At the time, it seemed like the responsible thing to do. I was the primary breadwinner, and I wanted to make sure my family would be financially secure if something happened to me. Simone also started encouraging me to take more risks with my business, to expand faster than I was comfortable with, to leverage more debt to fuel growth. "You're being too conservative," she said when I expressed concerns about taking on too much debt to fund a new project. "Sometimes you have to take big risks to get big rewards. I've built this company by being careful and making smart decisions. I don't want to risk everything we've built on one project. But think about what we could accomplish if this project succeeds. Think about the generational wealth we could build for the boys." Her focus on money and wealth building seemed to intensify over those months. She started talking more about our net worth, about investment opportunities, about ways to maximize our assets. At the time, I thought she was just being practical. We had 2 young children to think about, and it made sense that she'd be focused on building security for their future. She also started spending more time away from home, more business trips, more networking events, more evening meetings that ran later than usual. "I'm trying to expand into some new markets," she explained when I mentioned that I missed having her home for dinner. "It requires more travel and evening meetings, but it could really pay off in the long run."
She started working out more, buying new clothes, paying more attention to her appearance. When I complimented her on how good she looked, she said she was just trying to stay healthy and professional as her business grew. "Image matters in consulting," she said. "Clients want to work with someone who looks successful and put together." She also became more secretive about her phone and her computer. She used to leave them lying around casually, but she started taking them with her everywhere and keeping them face down when she wasn't using them. "Are you getting more sensitive calls from clients?" I asked when I noticed the change in her behavior. "Some of the information I'm dealing with is confidential," she said. "I have to be more careful about privacy and security." All of these changes seemed reasonable when they happened individually. A wife wanting to ensure her family's financial security, a businesswoman working to expand her company, a professional being careful about confidential information. But looking back, I can see that they formed a pattern of someone who was planning something that required careful preparation and absolute secrecy. The boys started asking questions about why Mommy was gone so much. "Where does Mommy go?" Darius Jr. asked one evening as I was putting him to bed. "She's working, son. She has meetings with clients who need her help with their businesses. Why can't she help them during the day when we're at school?" It was a good question, and one I'd started wondering about myself. "Sometimes grown-ups have to work at different times," I said. "But Mommy loves you very much, and she's working hard to make sure our family has everything we need." Marcus, who was younger and less analytical than his brother, just missed having his mother around for bedtime stories and morning breakfast routines. "I want Mommy to read to me," he said when Simone was at another late meeting. "Daddy can read to you," I said, picking up his favorite book. "But I want Mommy." So did I. I missed my wife, missed the woman who used to prioritize family time over business opportunities, missed the partner who used to share everything with me instead of keeping secrets about where she was going and who she was meeting with. But I told myself that this was temporary, that she was working hard to build something that would benefit our whole family, that I should be supportive rather than suspicious. I wish now that I'd trusted my instincts. I wish I'd asked harder questions, demanded more transparency, insisted on knowing exactly what kind of business required so much secrecy and so many late-night meetings. But I loved her, and I trusted her, and I wanted to believe that the woman I'd married was still the same person, even though her behavior was changing in ways that made me uncomfortable. The last conversation I had with Simone before the restaurant incident was typical of how our interactions had become, pleasant on the surface, but with undercurrents of tension and distance that I couldn't quite identify. She was packing for another business trip, this time to Atlanta to visit her sister Sarah and take the boys with her for what was supposed to be a long weekend. "How long will you be gone?" I asked as she folded clothes into her suitcase. "Just a few days. Sarah hasn't seen the boys in months, and I have some meetings in Atlanta that I can combine with the visit." "What kind of meetings?" "Potential new clients. Nothing definite yet, but worth exploring." She seemed distracted, almost impatient with my questions. The old Simone would have told me details about her potential clients, asked my advice about business strategies, shared her excitement about new opportunities. This Simone seemed like she wanted to get away from me as quickly as possible. "Will you call when you get there? Let me know you arrived safely?" "Of course, I always do." She kissed me goodbye, but it felt perfunctory rather than affectionate, like something she was supposed to do rather than something she wanted to do. "I love you," I said as she loaded the boys into her car. "Love you too," she replied, but she was already looking at her phone, already mentally somewhere else. I stood in the driveway and watched them drive away, feeling a sadness I couldn't explain. My wife and children were going to visit family for a few days. It should have been a normal, unremarkable occurrence. 3 days after Simone and the boys left for Atlanta, I was sitting in my usual booth at Bella's Fine Dining, reading the note that would save my life and shatter my world forever. The note that would teach me that sometimes the people who seem to love you most are the ones who are planning to destroy you. The note that would show me, once again, that my generous heart and trusting nature had made me a target for people who saw kindness as weakness and love as opportunity. But also the note that would prove once more that there are still people in the world willing to risk everything to save a stranger. People like Celeste, whoever she really was. People who restore your faith in humanity just when you need it most. I thought I'd finally learned how to protect myself from the people who wanted to use me. I thought I'd built walls high enough to keep the manipulators and the users out of my life. But as I sat in that restaurant booth, staring at the note that had just shattered my world, I realized that I'd been so focused on protecting myself from the obvious threats that I'd missed the ones right under my nose. Someone was waiting at my house to kill me. And somehow I knew with terrible certainty that it wasn't a stranger who wanted my money.
It was someone much closer to home. Someone who'd been planning this for a long time. Someone I trusted with my life, my heart, and my children. Someone who'd spent 5 years pretending to love me while planning the day they'd inherit everything I'd worked for. I looked around the restaurant one more time, searching for Celeste. I needed answers, needed to know how she'd found out about this trap, needed to understand who was planning to hurt me and why. But she was nowhere to be seen. The other waitstaff were going about their business like nothing had happened, like someone hadn't just saved my life with a folded piece of paper. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to call 911. The numbers seemed to blur together as I tried to dial, my fingers trembling so badly I had to start over twice. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Darius Williams. I believe someone is waiting at my house to hurt me. I received a warning that it's a trap. Sir, are you in immediate danger right now? No, I'm at a restaurant, but someone warned me not to go home tonight. Someone is waiting there to hurt me. What's your home address, sir? I gave them my address in Charlotte, my voice barely above a whisper. The dispatcher stayed calm and professional, asking me questions about who might want to hurt me, whether I had received any threats recently, whether I had enemies who might want to harm me. Enemies. The word kept echoing in my mind. Did I have enemies? I'd spent my whole life trying to help people, trying to be kind and generous and good. How could someone like me have enemies dangerous enough to want me dead? But even as I asked myself that question, I knew the answer. In my 40 years on this earth, I'd learned that sometimes the people who hate you most are the ones you've helped the most. Sometimes generosity breeds resentment instead of gratitude. Sometimes being good to people makes them see you as weak, as someone to be exploited rather than appreciated. Sir, we're sending units to your address right now to investigate. In the meantime, I need you to stay where you are and remain calm. Do not go home tonight under any circumstances. Is there somewhere safe you can stay? Yes, I can get a hotel room. Good. We'll have officers contact you once they've secured the area. Stay on the line with me until our units arrive at your residence. I sat there in that booth holding the phone to my ear, listening to the dispatcher coordinate with patrol units. My whole world was spinning around me, and I felt like I was drowning in questions I didn't want to know the answers to. Someone wanted me dead. Someone who knew my routine well enough to know I'd be at this restaurant tonight. Someone who knew what time I usually got home. Someone who'd planned this carefully enough to have people waiting for me with weapons. But who? Who in my life had both the knowledge and the motivation to do something like this? My first thought was my family. Maybe cutting them off hadn't been enough. Maybe they'd been angry enough about losing their financial lifeline to decide that if they couldn't have my money while I was alive, they'd try to get it after I was dead. But that didn't make complete sense. I'd been very careful about my will and estate planning. Most of my money was going to charity, with generous provisions for Simone and the boys, but nothing significant for my extended family. My mother and siblings would get nothing if something happened to me. Unless they didn't know that. Unless they assumed that blood relatives would automatically inherit something, or that they could contest the will and get a portion of the estate through the courts. Or unless someone had lied to them about what they stood to gain from my death. Sir, our units have arrived at your residence. They're approaching the house now. Stay on the line. I could hear radio chatter in the background, officers coordinating their approach to my house.
My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my mouth was so dry I could barely swallow. Sir, we have visual confirmation of movement inside the residence. Multiple individuals. They appear to be armed. Armed. Someone had brought weapons to my house. Someone had been sitting in my living room with guns, waiting to kill me the moment I walked through the door. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. If Celeste hadn't warned me, if I'd gone home as usual after dinner, I'd be dead right now, shot down in my own home by people who'd planned my murder with careful precision. Officers are preparing to enter the residence now, sir. Continue to stay on the line. The next few minutes were the longest of my life. I could hear shouting in the background, commands being given, what sounded like people running and doors being broken down. Then there was silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Sir, we've apprehended 4 individuals inside your residence. They were armed with handguns and knives, and they'd positioned themselves in your living room where they could see the front door. It appears they'd been waiting there for several hours. 4 people. 4 people with guns and knives sitting in my house, waiting to kill me when I came home from dinner. Did they resist arrest? Is anyone hurt? No injuries to our officers. The suspects are in custody and being transported to the station for questioning. Detective Morrison will be in touch with you shortly to get a full statement. Did they say anything? Did they say who sent them or why they were there? They're not talking right now, sir, but we found some items in their possession that suggest this was a planned operation. Someone gave them detailed information about your residence and your daily routine. After I hung up with the dispatcher, I sat there in that booth for another hour, unable to move, unable to think clearly, unable to process what had just happened. The waitstaff kept glancing at me with concern, probably wondering why I was just sitting there staring into space while my food got cold. Finally, my phone rang again. Detective Morrison. Mr. Williams, this is Detective Morrison with the Charlotte Police Department. I need you to come down to the station so we can get your statement and discuss what we found at your residence. What did you find? It's better if we discuss this in person, sir. This is a complex situation, and we need to gather as much information as possible. I drove to the police station in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities. Who had I trusted enough to give them detailed information about my daily routine? Who knew I went to that restaurant every Tuesday night? Who knew what time I usually got home? The list wasn't very long. Simone, obviously. Lawrence, my personal assistant who managed my schedule. Byron, my best friend who had been to my house countless times. A few employees who'd worked for me for years and knew my habits. At the station, Detective Morrison filled me in on what they'd discovered. 4 men, all with criminal records, all armed with guns and knives, all wearing masks and gloves. They'd broken into my house around 7 p.m. and positioned themselves strategically where they could see the front door and any other entrances I might use. They weren't planning to rob you, Mr. Williams. This was an assassination. They were going to kill you the moment you walked into your house, then stage it to look like a home invasion gone wrong. How do you know that? Because of what we found in their possession. They had detailed floor plans of your house, including the location of security cameras and motion sensors. They had photographs of you, taken from different angles and at different times. They had your daily schedule written out in careful detail, what time you left for work, where you went for lunch, what time you usually got home. My blood turned to ice. Those aren't things you could get from following me for a few days. Someone who knows me very well provided that information. That's exactly what we think. This was an inside job, Mr. Williams. Someone close to you set this up. Detective Morrison showed me evidence bags containing the items they'd found. Professional surveillance photos of me entering and leaving various buildings, detailed notes about my security system and how to bypass it, even copies of my house keys.
How did they get copies of my keys? That's what we need to figure out. Who has access to your house keys? I thought about it. Simone, obviously. Lawrence had a set for emergencies. Byron had borrowed them a few times when he was helping me with projects around the house. My housekeeper, Maria Elena, had a set. That was it. Just 4 people. Detective, I need to ask you something that's going to sound paranoid, but I have to know. Is my wife safe? Could whoever did this be planning to hurt her and my children too? Detective Morrison's expression grew serious. Where are your wife and children right now? Atlanta. They're visiting her sister for the week. When did they leave for Atlanta? 3 days ago. It was supposed to be a short trip, just a long weekend, but Simone decided to extend it. Mr. Williams, I need you to think carefully about this. Did your wife know you'd be at that restaurant tonight? Of course she knew. I go there every Tuesday night. It's been my routine for 3 years. Did she call or text you at all this evening? I thought back to earlier in the evening. Yes, she texted me around 7 to ask if I'd made it to the restaurant safely. Then she called around 8:30 to check on me again. What exactly did she say during these conversations? She asked if I was at Bella's, if I was having a good dinner, what time I thought I'd be getting home. Normal stuff that married couples talk about. But even as I said it, something felt wrong. Simone usually didn't check on me quite so frequently when she was out of town, and there had been something in her tone during the phone call. Not worry exactly, but a kind of anticipation that I couldn't quite identify. Mr. Williams, we're going to need to verify your wife's whereabouts this evening. Do you have contact information for her sister? Yes, but why would you need to verify? I stopped mid-sentence as the implication hit me. You think Simone might be involved in this? We have to investigate all possibilities. When someone has as much detailed information about your life as these men had, it usually means the information came from someone very close to the victim. The word victim sent a chill down my spine. That's what I was now, not a successful businessman, not a generous man who tried to help others, but a victim. Someone had tried to murder me in my own home. Detective, there's something else you should know. About 6 months ago, Simone started asking questions about my will and my life insurance policies. She said she wanted to make sure the boys would be taken care of if something happened to me. What kind of questions? How much life insurance I had, who the beneficiaries were, whether the policies were up to date. She even suggested I should increase my coverage, said that with my net worth, the current policies wouldn't be enough to maintain the boys' lifestyle if I died. Detective Morrison made detailed notes. Did she suggest any specific changes to your will or insurance? She wanted me to update the beneficiary information to make sure she'd have complete control over everything if I died. She said it would be simpler for tax purposes and estate planning. And did you make those changes? I updated some things, yes, made sure she'd be able to access accounts immediately, increased the insurance coverage like she suggested. I thought I was being a responsible husband and father. The more I talked about it, the more uneasy I became. Simone's questions hadn't seemed suspicious at the time. They'd seemed like the practical concerns of a wife who wanted to make sure her family would be secure. But now, in the context of an assassination attempt, they took on a much more sinister meaning. Mr. Williams, I'm going to ask you some questions that might be difficult to hear, but I need honest answers. Has your wife's behavior changed at all in recent months? Has she seemed different in any way? I thought about it. Had Simone been different lately? Actually, yes. She had been different. More affectionate in some ways, more distant in others. She had been encouraging me to take more risks with my business, to leverage more debt, to expand faster than I was comfortable with.
When I'd asked her why she was pushing so hard for aggressive growth, she had said she wanted to make sure we built generational wealth for the boys. She'd also been spending more time away from home. More trips to visit her sister, more girls' nights out, more business networking events that seemed to run later and later. When I'd mentioned that I missed spending time with her, she had gotten defensive, accusing me of being controlling and not supporting her need for independence. She's been different, yes. More focused on money and financial planning than she used to be, and she's been spending more time away from home. Has she mentioned any new friends, anyone she's been spending time with that you don't know well?
I thought about that too. Simone had mentioned a few new friends from her networking group, people she'd been having lunch with or meeting for drinks, but she'd been vague about who they were or how she'd met them. There's been some new people in her social circle, but she hasn't introduced me to most of them, said they were just casual friendships from her business network. Mr. Williams, I need to ask you directly, is it possible that your wife might be having an affair? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. An affair? Simone. But even as I wanted to deny it immediately, pieces started falling into place. The late nights, the mysterious friends, the increased focus on financial planning, the way she'd seemed emotionally distant even when she was being physically affectionate. I don't know. I never suspected anything like that, but now that you mention it, there have been some signs I might have ignored. What kind of signs? She's been secretive about her phone. She used to leave it lying around, but now she takes it with her everywhere and keeps it face down. She's started working out more, buying new clothes, wearing different perfume. She says it's just about feeling good about herself, but it could also be about impressing someone else. The thought made me physically ill. Had my wife been cheating on me? Had she been planning my death while sleeping in my bed and raising my children? Detective, even if Simone was having an affair, that doesn't mean she'd want me dead. People get divorced. They don't usually resort to murder. Not usually, no, but when there's a lot of money involved, people sometimes choose murder over divorce because it's more profitable. Divorce means splitting assets. Death means inheriting everything. He was right, and I knew it. If Simone divorced me, she'd get half of our marital assets, which would still be a substantial amount, but nothing compared to what she'd inherit if I died. My life insurance alone was worth $20 million, and that was just the beginning. We need to talk to your wife, Detective Morrison said, tonight. She's in Atlanta with the children. You can't just accuse her of trying to have me killed without proof. We're not going to accuse her of anything. We're going to ask her some questions and verify her whereabouts this evening. If she's innocent, she'll want to cooperate with our investigation. But what if she wasn't innocent? What if the woman I'd loved and trusted had been planning my death? What if the mother of my children had been working with criminals to make me a victim of violence in my own home? My phone rang. Simone. Detective Morrison gestured for me to answer it, then signaled for me to put it on speaker. Hey, baby, I just wanted to check on you one more time before bed. Are you home safe? Her voice sounded normal, loving, concerned, but there was something underneath it, a tension, an anticipation that I'd never noticed before, but now seemed obvious. Fine, sweetheart. Actually, I'm still out. I had to take care of some business after dinner. Business? This late? What kind of business? Just some paperwork stuff, nothing important. There was a pause that lasted just a few seconds too long. When do you think you'll be home? I'm not sure. Might be pretty late. Another pause. Okay, well, don't wait up for me if you're tired. I love you. I love you too, Simone. After I hung up, Detective Morrison and I looked at each other. Did you hear that? Hear what? She asked 3 times about when you'd be home.
That's not normal concern. That's someone who needs to know your timeline for a specific reason. He was right. Simone's questions hadn't sounded like a loving wife checking on her husband's safety. They'd sounded like someone who was coordinating with other people, someone who needed to know exactly when I'd be arriving at a specific location. We need to call her back and ask her to come home immediately. If she's innocent, she'll want to be here to support you through this crisis. If she's not innocent, she'll make excuses for why she can't return. I called Simone back, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. "Hey, baby, miss me already?" she said, laughing. "Simone, I need you to come home. Tonight." "What? Why? What's wrong?" "There was a break-in at the house. Some men with weapons. The police caught them, but I need you and the boys here with me." Complete silence. Not the gasp of shock I would have expected, not immediate concern for my safety, just silence. "Simone? Are you there?" "Yes, I'm here. I'm just processing this. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but I need my family with me. Can you drive back tonight?" "Tonight? Darius, it's already late and the boys are already asleep. It would be dangerous to drive at night with them in the car." "Then come back first thing in the morning. I need you here, Simone." "Of course, baby. Of course I'll come home. I'll leave as soon as the sun comes up." But there was something in her voice, a careful quality, like she was choosing her words very deliberately. "Simone, did you tell anyone about my dinner plans tonight? Did you mention to anyone that I'd be at Bella's?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I might have mentioned it to someone. Why?" "Who did you tell?" I don't remember exactly. Maybe someone from my networking group?" "Darius, why are you asking me these questions? You're scaring me." But she didn't sound scared. She sounded like someone who was trying to sound scared. After we hung up, Detective Morrison shook his head. "Mr. Williams, I've been doing this for 20 years. That woman is hiding something." "You think she's involved?" "I think we need to dig deeper into her background and her recent activities, and I think we need to do it fast before she has a chance to destroy evidence or disappear." Over the next few hours, Detective Morrison and his team worked with incredible efficiency. They ran background checks on Simone, analyzed her phone records, tracked her credit card usage, and contacted the Atlanta police to verify her whereabouts. What they found destroyed my world. The woman I'd married wasn't named Simone Williams. Her real name was Sandra Mitchell, and she had a criminal history that included fraud, identity theft, and suspected involvement in the death of 2 previous husbands. Both of her previous husbands had been wealthy men who died under suspicious circumstances shortly after updating their life insurance policies and wills to benefit her. Both cases had been investigated, but she'd never been charged due to lack of evidence. "She's what we call a black widow," Detective Morrison explained. "A woman who targets wealthy men, marries them, gains their trust, then kills them for their money." "But we have children together. She lived with me for 5 years. She built a life with me." "That's what makes her so dangerous, Mr. Williams. She's patient. She's willing to invest years in a relationship if the payoff is big enough, and your payoff is bigger than anything she's ever targeted before." The phone records showed that Simone had been in constant contact with someone in Charlotte throughout the evening, someone whose number wasn't in my phone, someone I didn't know. "We traced the number," Detective Morrison said. "It belongs to a man named Byron Washington." Byron? My best friend of 15 years. The man who'd been my best man at my wedding. The man who'd held my children when they were babies. The man who'd comforted me when I had had to cut off my family. Who'd supported me through every major decision in my adult life. That's impossible. Byron would never hurt me. "Mr. Williams, we have phone records showing dozens of calls between your wife and Byron Washington over the past 6 months. Long calls at all hours of the day and night. We also have evidence that they've been meeting regularly at hotels around the city."
The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that I couldn't process it. Not only had my wife been planning to kill me, but she'd been doing it with my best friend. The two people I trusted most in the world had been working together to destroy my life. "There's more," Detective Morrison said gently. "We ran DNA tests on some evidence we found in Byron's apartment. Mr. Williams, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your children aren't biologically yours. They belong to Byron Washington." The words didn't make sense at first. My sons, my beautiful boys who looked at me with such love and trust, who called me daddy, who ran to me with skinned knees and bedtime stories. They weren't mine? How is that possible? "Sandra was already pregnant when she met you. She and Byron planned it that way. Having children would make you more trusting, more likely to include her in your financial planning, more willing to update your will and insurance policies to benefit her." Every happy memory of my marriage crumbled in that moment. Darius Jr.'s first steps, Marcus's first words, family vacations, bedtime stories, birthday parties, all of it had been a lie. I'd been raising another man's children while that man planned my death with their mother. The investigation moved quickly after that. They arrested Byron at his apartment where they found detailed plans of my house, copies of my security codes, and a timeline showing exactly how they'd planned to kill me and dispose of my body. During his interrogation, Byron confessed everything. How he'd met Sandra years before she'd ever approached me, how they'd worked together to target wealthy men in other cities, how they'd researched my business and my assets before deciding I was worth the long-term investment. "But it wasn't supposed to take 5 years, Detective Morrison told me after reading the confession. "Originally, the plan was to marry you, have children to cement the relationship, then kill you within 2 years. But Sandra got greedy. She wanted to wait until your business was worth even more." "What about my family? How do they fit into this?" "That's where it gets even more twisted. Your mother and sister were involved from the beginning." I felt like I was going to be sick. "What do you mean, involved?" "According to Byron's confession, your mother contacted Sandra through a mutual acquaintance about 2 years after you'd cut off financial support to your family. She hired Sandra to seduce you and marry you with the understanding that they'd split any assets Sandra obtained through divorce." My own mother hired someone to marry me for my money? The original plan was for Sandra to divorce you after a few years and give your mother and sister a cut of the settlement. But Sandra and Byron decided that murder would be more profitable than divorce. Why split assets through divorce when they could inherit everything through death? The conspiracy was so elaborate, so carefully planned that it took my breath away. My mother had spent years researching my business and my personal life, gathering information that she'd passed along to Sandra. My sister had helped by providing details about my childhood, my personality, my weaknesses, information that Sandra could use to manipulate me more effectively. They had planned every detail of my destruction. Sandra had been coached on what kind of woman would appeal to me, what interests to pretend to have, what personality traits to display. She'd studied my previous marriage to Shanice and learned from her ex-wife's mistakes. Where Shanice had been obviously interested in money, Sandra had pretended to be independent and successful in her own right. The children had been part of the plan from the beginning. Byron and Sandra had calculated that having children would make me more trusting, more likely to include her in my financial planning, more willing to update my will and insurance policies to benefit her. Every moment of happiness I'd felt during my marriage had been a performance designed to steal my life and my money. Every I love you, every tender moment, every family memory had been part of an elaborate con game that was supposed to end with my death. Why didn't they just go through with the original divorce plan? Why did they decide to kill me instead? Money, Detective Morrison said simply. Divorce would have given Sandra maybe half of your marital assets. Death would have given her everything. Life insurance, business interests, real estate, investments, the works. We're talking about the difference between maybe $50 million and over $200 million. $200 million. That's what my life had been worth to them.
The arrest of Sandra happened in Atlanta, and I'll never forget Detective Morrison's description of how she reacted when they told her the assassination attempt had failed. He said, "She didn't seem surprised that we knew about the plot. She just asked if you were dead yet. When we told her you were alive, she actually seemed annoyed." Annoyed? The woman who'd cried on the phone the night before, telling me how worried she was about the break-in, was annoyed to learn I'd survived an assassination attempt. During her interrogation, Sandra showed no remorse whatsoever. When asked why she'd done it, she looked directly at the camera and said, "Because he was stupid enough to believe that someone like me could actually love someone like him." The coldness of it was breathtaking. For 5 years she'd shared my bed, eaten at my table, played with children she'd had with another man, all while planning the day she'd inherit my fortune. Byron was equally heartless. During his confession, he talked about our friendship like it had been a job assignment. "I never liked him," he said. "He always acted like he was better than everyone else, like his success made him special. He didn't deserve all that money." I'd earned every penny through years of hard work, smart business decisions, and calculated risks. But in Byron's mind, my success was somehow undeserved, and that justified murder. The trial took 2 years. During that time, I learned details about the conspiracy that made me physically ill. Sandra had been married twice before, and both of her previous husbands had died under suspicious circumstances. The first had supposedly fallen down the stairs in his own home, hitting his head on a concrete step. The second had died of a heart attack at age 35, despite having no history of heart problems. Both men had recently updated their life insurance policies and wills before they died. Both deaths had been investigated, but Sandra had never been charged due to lack of direct evidence. I was supposed to be her third victim. The plan was to stage my death as a home invasion robbery, with Byron providing an alibi for Sandra by confirming that she'd been in Atlanta with the children all evening. The 4 men who'd been waiting in my house were career criminals who'd been promised $50,000 each for the job. They didn't know the identity of their employer. All communication had gone through Byron, who'd hired them on Sandra's behalf. If Celeste hadn't warned me, the plan would have worked perfectly. I would have walked into my house and been shot dead in my own living room. Sandra would have returned from Atlanta the next day to discover my body, played the role of the grieving widow, and inherited everything. The sentences were severe. Sandra got life in prison without the possibility of parole. Byron got life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. My mother got 15 years for conspiracy and fraud. My sister got 10 years as an accessory. The 4 hitmen got various sentences ranging from 25 years to life, depending on their cooperation with the investigation and their previous criminal records. But no amount of prison time could undo the damage they'd done to my life. They'd stolen 5 years from me, destroyed my ability to trust anyone, and left me questioning every relationship I'd ever had. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, though that was devastating enough. The worst part was realizing how close they'd come to succeeding. If Celeste hadn't risked her own safety to warn me, I'd be dead and they'd have gotten away with everything. I spent months in therapy trying to process what had happened to me. How do you recover from learning that your entire life has been a lie? How do you learn to trust again when the people closest to you were planning your death? But slowly, with help from my therapist and a few genuine friends who'd proven their loyalty over the years, I began to rebuild my sense of self and my faith in human nature. The key was understanding that Sandra, Byron, and my family didn't represent all of humanity. Yes, there were people in the world who would exploit kindness and generosity for their own gain. But there were also people like Celeste, who would risk their own safety to protect a stranger. Celeste. I needed to find her and thank her properly for saving my life. I went back to Bella's Fine Dining a few days after the arrests, hoping to catch her during her shift. When I walked in, the hostess recognized me immediately. "Mr. Williams, we heard about what happened. Are you all right?" Word had gotten out about the arrest and the attempted murder. The local news had covered the story extensively, calling it the Black Widow case, and focusing on the elaborate nature of the conspiracy.
I'm okay, thank you. Is Celeste working tonight? Celeste? I haven't seen her in a few days. Let me check the schedule. She came back looking confused. Mr. Williams, according to our records, we've never had an employee named Celeste. Are you sure you have the right restaurant? That was impossible. Celeste had been serving me for months. I knew her, had talked to her countless times, even helped her mother with medical bills. She's young, maybe 22, African American, always very friendly and professional. She knew about my routine, knew I came here every Tuesday. The hostess shook her head. I've been here for 3 years and I know all our servers. We've never had anyone by that name. I asked to speak to the manager who told me the same thing. No employee named Celeste, no record of anyone matching her description, no explanation for how someone who didn't work there had been serving me for months. It was like she had never existed. But she had to exist. She had saved my life. She'd slipped me that note, warned me about the trap, given me the chance to call the police before walking into an ambush. I spent days trying to figure out who Celeste really was and how she'd known about the plot to kill me. I hired a private investigator to look into it, but he came up empty. No trace of anyone matching her description, no connection to any of the conspirators, no explanation for how she'd obtained the information that saved my life. Finally, I had to accept that I might never know who she really was or how she'd learned about the plan to kill me. But whoever she was, whatever her real name might have been, she'd risked her own safety to save a stranger's life. In a world full of people who'd betrayed me for money, she'd been willing to help me for nothing but the satisfaction of doing the right thing. That gave me hope. Not everyone was like Sandra and Byron in my family. There were still people in the world who would choose kindness over profit, who would help others without expecting anything in return. I decided to honor her memory, because by then I'd begun to think of her almost as a guardian angel who'd appeared when I needed her most, by dedicating myself to helping people the way she'd helped me. I started a foundation focused on protecting people from financial fraud and exploitation. We provided legal assistance to victims of inheritance scams, romance fraud, and other crimes that targeted people's generosity and trust. We also created a program to help people identify and avoid predatory relationships, the kind of elaborate long-term cons that Sandra had specialized in. We taught people the warning signs, provided background check services, and offered counseling to victims who'd been targeted by Black Widow killers and other predators.
The foundation grew rapidly because, unfortunately, there were far too many people who needed our services. I learned that what had happened to me wasn't uncommon. Wealthy individuals were frequently targeted by sophisticated criminals who were willing to invest years in elaborate cons designed to steal their money or their lives. Through the foundation work, I met dozens of people who'd survived similar betrayals. Men and women who'd been targeted by predatory spouses, children who'd discovered their parents were stealing from them, business partners who'd been planning elaborate frauds for years. Their stories helped me understand that I wasn't alone in what I'd experienced. More importantly, they helped me realize that surviving betrayal didn't have to make me bitter or cynical. I could choose to use my experience to help others avoid similar traps. One of the people I met through the foundation was Maria Santos. She was a social worker who'd been helping fraud victims for 10 years, and she'd contacted our organization because she was seeing more and more elaborate cases that required resources beyond what traditional social services could provide. Maria had been betrayed too, but in a different way. Her first husband had been stealing from elderly clients at the bank where he worked, using Maria's reputation in the community to gain their trust. When the scheme was discovered, she'd lost her job, her savings, and her reputation, even though she'd had no knowledge of his crimes. Instead of becoming bitter, Maria had dedicated her life to helping other victims of financial fraud. She understood the shame, the self-doubt, and the difficulty of learning to trust again after being betrayed by someone you loved. We worked together on several cases, and I found myself drawn to her genuine compassion for others and her resilience in the face of her own trauma. She wasn't impressed by my wealth. If anything, she was more interested in my commitment to using that wealth to help people who needed it most. Maria understood what it was like to have your entire world turned upside down by betrayal. She understood the process of rebuilding your life and learning to trust again. She understood the difference between healthy caution and paranoid isolation. We understood each other in a way that felt natural and comfortable. We both knew what it was like to be targeted by people we trusted. We both knew the importance of authentic relationships built on genuine care rather than financial benefit. When I proposed to Maria 2 years later, it was with complete honesty about my past, my fears, and my determination to build something real with someone who understood the value of genuine love over financial gain. Our relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared experiences rather than physical attraction or financial considerations. We both had been burned badly by people we trusted, and we both understood the importance of taking time to really know someone before opening our hearts completely. Maria never asked me for money, never showed interest in my business empire, never tried to influence my financial decisions. She had her own career, her own goals, her own life that she'd built through years of hard work and dedication to helping others. When we talked about the future, it was about the work we wanted to do together, the people we wanted to help, the difference we wanted to make in the world. She never mentioned expensive vacations, luxury cars, or the kind of lifestyle my wealth could provide. More importantly, she understood my need for security and boundaries. She didn't get offended when I had background checks run on people in her life. She didn't complain when I insisted on prenuptial agreements that protected both of our assets. She understood that these weren't signs of distrust toward her personally, but reasonable precautions based on what I'd survived. Our wedding was small and intimate, maybe 20 people, all of whom had proven their loyalty through years of genuine friendship. No extended family members who might see me as a financial opportunity. No business associates who might have ulterior motives. Just people who cared about us as individuals and wanted to see us happy together. The ceremony itself was held at the community center where Maria's social work program was based, surrounded by some of the people we'd helped through our foundation work. It felt appropriate to be married in a place dedicated to service and healing, surrounded by people who understood the value of genuine human connection over material wealth. During our vows, I promised Maria not just to love and support her, but to continue growing as a person who could distinguish between healthy generosity and destructive enabling. She promised me not just her love, but her patience as I continued learning to trust again after being so thoroughly betrayed. Our marriage has been everything my relationship with Sandra never was. Genuine, supportive, built on shared values rather than hidden agendas. Maria challenges me to be a better person, not through manipulation or guilt, but through her example of how to live a life dedicated to helping others without losing sight of your own needs and boundaries. We've been married for 3 years now, and every day I'm grateful not just for her love, but for her understanding of what I survived and how it shaped me. She doesn't try to fix my cautious nature or push me to trust people before I'm ready. She understands that my experiences taught me valuable lessons about discernment that make me better at helping others avoid similar traps. Through our foundation work together, we've helped hundreds of people who were targeted by predatory individuals similar to Sandra. We've provided legal assistance, counseling services, and financial support to victims of inheritance scams, romance fraud, and elaborate long-term cons designed to steal people's money or their lives. One case that particularly affected us involved an elderly man named Robert, whose own son had been stealing from him for years. The son had gained access to his accounts by convincing him to sign power of attorney documents, then systematically drained his savings while promising to invest the money for better returns. By the time Robert realized what was happening, he'd lost over $2 million and was facing foreclosure on the home he'd lived in for 40 years. His son had disappeared, leaving behind forged documents and a trail of lies that made it almost impossible to recover the stolen funds. Robert reminded me so much of myself in the years before Sandra entered my life. Generous to a fault, trusting family members who saw him as a resource rather than a person, unable to believe that someone he loved could deliberately hurt him for money. We were able to help Robert recover about half of his stolen money through legal action and insurance claims. More importantly, we helped him understand that his son's betrayal was a reflection of his son's character, not Robert's failure as a father. I keep thinking I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. The constant requests for money, the pressure to sign documents I didn't understand, the way he'd get angry when I asked questions about what he was doing with my accounts. The signs are always clear in retrospect, Maria explained to him. But when you love someone, you want to believe the best about them. That's not a weakness. That's what makes you human. The problem isn't that you trusted your son. The problem is that your son chose to abuse that trust. Those words helped Robert, and they helped me too. For years after Sandra's arrest, I had tormented myself with questions about what I should have seen, what I should have known, how I could have been so naive as to trust people who were planning my destruction. But Maria was right. The problem wasn't my generosity or my willingness to trust. The problem was that Sandra, Byron, and my family had chosen to exploit those qualities for their own selfish gain. I couldn't change what had happened to me, but I could use what I learned to help others avoid similar traps. And I could choose to continue being generous and kind, just with better boundaries and more careful discernment about who deserved my trust. Through our foundation work together, we've helped hundreds of people who were targeted by predatory individuals similar to Sandra. We've provided legal assistance, counseling services, and financial support to victims of inheritance scams, romance fraud, and elaborate long-term cons designed to steal people's money or their lives.
One of our most successful programs involves working with financial institutions to identify suspicious account activity that might indicate someone is being exploited by a family member or romantic partner. We've helped banks develop protocols for protecting customers who might be victims of financial abuse, and we've provided training for bank employees on how to recognize and report signs of exploitation. The work has been incredibly fulfilling, but it's also been emotionally challenging. Every case reminds me of my own experience with betrayal, and every victim's story brings back memories of how it felt to realize that people I loved had been planning my destruction. But it's also shown me something important. For every Sandra Mitchell in the world, there are dozens of people like Celeste. People willing to risk their own safety to protect a stranger. People who choose kindness over profit. People who restore your faith in humanity just when you need it most. I never did find out who Celeste really was or how she'd learned about the plot to kill me. The private investigator I hired spent months following every possible lead, but came up with nothing. No employee records, no security camera footage, no witnesses who could confirm her identity. It was like she'd appeared in my life just long enough to save it, then vanished without a trace. Sometimes I wonder if she was even real, or if she was some kind of guardian angel sent to protect me when I needed protection most. I know that sounds crazy, but I can't explain her any other way. How else do you account for someone who knew about a murder plot but didn't exist in any official capacity? Whoever she was, whatever her real story might have been, she changed the course of my life in the most fundamental way possible. Without her warning, I'd be dead, and Sandra would have inherited everything. My story would have ended that Tuesday night in March, shot down in my own living room by hired killers. Instead, I'm alive, remarried to someone who loves me for who I am rather than what I can provide, and dedicating my life to helping people avoid the kind of betrayal I experienced. I've learned that being generous doesn't make you weak, and being kind doesn't make you stupid, but it does make you a target for people who see kindness as something to be exploited rather than appreciated.
The key is learning to distinguish between people who deserve your generosity and people who will use it against you. It's learning to help others without enabling destructive behavior. It's learning to trust carefully rather than blindly. Most importantly, it's learning that being betrayed by people who didn't deserve your trust doesn't mean you should stop trusting people who do. Every day, I meet people who restore my faith in humanity. Social workers like Maria who dedicate their lives to helping others despite earning modest salaries. Police officers like Detective Morrison who go above and beyond to protect victims of crime. Ordinary citizens who report suspicious activity or offer help to people in need. These people remind me that the world is full of both Sandra Mitchells and Celestes. The challenge is learning to tell the difference between them and choosing to surround yourself with people who bring out the best in you rather than people who see you as something to be exploited. I still think about Celeste every Tuesday when I drive past Bella's Fine Dining. I don't eat there anymore, too many painful memories associated with that place, but I always slow down and remember the night she saved my life with a folded piece of paper. I've left standing instructions with my foundation that if anyone ever comes forward with information about who she really was or how she knew about the murder plot, we'll provide whatever assistance she might need. It's the least I can do for someone who risked everything to save a stranger. Sometimes people ask me if I regret being generous for so many years, if I wish I'd been more selfish and protective of my resources from the beginning. The answer is no. My generosity allowed me to help thousands of people who genuinely needed assistance. It allowed me to build a business empire that provides jobs and services to communities across the country. It allowed me to create a foundation that protects vulnerable people from the kind of exploitation I experienced. Yes, my generosity also made me a target for people like Sandra and Byron and my own family members who saw my kindness as weakness to be exploited. But that's a reflection of their character, not mine. I've learned to be more careful about who I help and how I help them. I've learned to set boundaries and enforce them. I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong, even if I can't articulate exactly what's bothering me. But I haven't stopped being generous, and I haven't stopped helping people who need assistance. I've just gotten better at distinguishing between genuine need and manipulative exploitation. The foundation work has introduced me to countless people who've been helped by genuine kindness from strangers. People who were assisted through difficult times by individuals who expected nothing in return. People whose lives were changed by the generosity of others. These stories balance out the painful experiences I had with people who used my kindness against me. They remind me that for every person who will exploit your generosity, there are many more who will appreciate it and pay it forward to others. One story that particularly moved me involved a young single mother named Lisa, whose car had broken down on her way to a job interview. She was standing beside the road with her 2 young children, trying to figure out how to get to the interview on time, when a stranger stopped to help. The stranger, an elderly man named Frank, not only gave her a ride to the interview, he waited for her to finish, drove her and the children home, and then arranged for his mechanic friend to fix her car at no charge. Lisa got the job and was eventually able to save enough money to buy a reliable car. But more importantly, Frank's kindness taught her that there were still good people in the world willing to help others without expecting anything in return. Years later, when Lisa had achieved financial stability, she started volunteering with our foundation, helping other single mothers navigate financial crises and access resources they need to support their families. She told me, "Frank showed me that kindness isn't about what you can afford to give. It's about choosing to help when you see someone who needs it. He didn't help me because he was rich. He helped me because it was the right thing to do." That's the kind of generosity I want to practice now. Helping people because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm trying to buy love or acceptance or approval from people who aren't capable of appreciating genuine kindness. The difference is that now I'm more careful about who I help and how I help them. I've learned to distinguish between people who are temporarily struggling and need assistance to get back on their feet, and people who want to make their problems my permanent responsibility. I've learned to help in ways that empower people to solve their own problems, rather than creating dependency on my resources. I've learned to support people's efforts to improve their situations, rather than enabling them to avoid the consequences of destructive choices. Most importantly, I've learned that real generosity isn't about giving people what they ask for, it's about giving them what they need to build better lives for themselves. The foundation has helped me channel my generous nature in ways that are both more effective and more sustainable. Instead of giving individual handouts that create dependency, we provide education, training, legal assistance, and other resources that help people solve their problems permanently. We've helped thousands of people avoid financial fraud, escape abusive relationships, recover from exploitation, and build more secure futures for themselves and their families. The work is challenging and sometimes heartbreaking, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Every person we help is a victory over the Sandra Mitchells of the world. Every family we protect from financial fraud is proof that kindness and generosity, when applied wisely, can make a real difference in people's lives. I know now that my generous nature isn't a flaw to be corrected, it's a gift to be used responsibly. The key is making sure it benefits people who deserve help, rather than people who will exploit it for their own selfish purposes. Sandra Mitchell and Byron Washington and my own family members saw my kindness as weakness to be exploited. But people like Celeste and Maria and the thousands of foundation clients I've worked with see it as strength to be appreciated and emulated. The difference is that the first group was looking for what they could take from me, while the second group appreciates what I'm willing to give freely. I've learned to focus my energy on the second group, people who deserve kindness, who appreciate it, and who pay it forward to others. These are the people who make generosity worthwhile, who restore your faith in humanity, who remind you why helping others is one of the most important things you can do with your life. Sometimes people ask me if I'm happy now, after everything I've been through. The answer is yes, but it's a different kind of happiness than I had before. Before Sandra's betrayal, my happiness was based on ignorance. I was happy because I didn't know that people I loved were planning to kill me. I was happy because I didn't understand how thoroughly I was being manipulated and exploited. Now, my happiness is based on wisdom earned through painful experience. I'm happy because I've learned to distinguish between genuine love and elaborate deception. I'm happy because I've found someone who loves me for who I am, rather than what I can provide. I'm happy because I'm using my resources to make a real difference in the lives of people who deserve assistance. It's a more complicated happiness, tempered by knowledge of how cruel people can be to each other. But it's also a more sustainable happiness, based on authentic relationships and meaningful work rather than illusions and wishful thinking. Every morning when I wake up next to Maria, I'm grateful to be alive. Not just because Sandra and Byron's plan failed, but because I've been given a second chance to live a life based on wisdom rather than naivety, on careful discernment rather than blind trust. I've learned to focus my energy on the second group, people who deserve kindness, who appreciate it, and who pay it forward to others. These are the people who make generosity worthwhile, who restore your faith in humanity, who remind you why helping others is one of the most important things you can do with your life. Sometimes people ask me if I'm happy now, after everything I've been through. The answer is yes, but it's a different kind of happiness than I had before. Before Sandra's betrayal, my happiness was based on ignorance. I was happy because I didn't know that people I loved were planning to kill me. I was happy because I didn't understand how thoroughly I was being manipulated and exploited. Now, my happiness is based on wisdom earned through painful experience. I'm happy because I've learned to distinguish between genuine love and elaborate deception. I'm happy because I found someone who loves me for who I am rather than what I can provide. I'm happy because I'm using my resources to make a real difference in the lives of people who deserve assistance.
It's a more complicated happiness, tempered by knowledge of how cruel people can be to each other. But it's also a more sustainable happiness, based on authentic relationships and meaningful work rather than illusions and wishful thinking. Every morning when I wake up next to Maria, I'm grateful to be alive. Not just because Sandra and Byron's plan failed, but because I've been given a second chance to live a life based on wisdom rather than naivety, on careful discernment rather than blind trust. I'm grateful for the hard lessons I learned about human nature, even though they were painful to learn. I'm grateful for the opportunity to use those lessons to help others avoid similar betrayals. I'm grateful for the people in my life who've proven that genuine kindness and love still exist, even in a world that sometimes seems dominated by greed and selfishness. Most of all, I'm grateful to Celeste, wherever she is and whoever she really was. She saved more than my life that Tuesday night. She saved my ability to believe in the fundamental goodness of human nature. She reminded me that for every person willing to exploit kindness, there's someone else willing to risk their own safety to protect a stranger. That's the lesson I want to leave you with. Yes, there are people in the world who will use your generosity against you. There are people who will see your kindness as weakness to be exploited rather than strength to be appreciated. But there are also people who will risk everything to help someone they barely know. There are people who will choose kindness over profit, love over money, integrity over convenience. The challenge isn't to become cynical and suspicious of everyone. The challenge is to learn to tell the difference between the two types of people and to surround yourself with individuals who bring out the best in you rather than people who see you as something to be used. Don't stop being generous. Don't stop helping people who need assistance. Don't stop believing in the power of human kindness to change lives and make the world a better place. Just be smarter about who deserves your generosity and more careful about how you offer your help. Plant seeds of kindness wherever you go, but make sure you're planting them in soil that will allow them to grow into something beautiful, rather than something that will eventually choke out everything good in your life. Because in the end, the world needs more people willing to slip notes to strangers in restaurants, warning them about traps that could destroy their lives. The world needs more people like Celeste. And the world needs more people willing to learn from betrayal without becoming bitter, willing to trust again without being naive, willing to help others without enabling destructive behavior. That's how we honor the kindness we've received from others, by paying it forward wisely, generously, and with the discernment that comes from understanding both the best and worst of human nature. That's how we make sure the Sandra Mitchells of the world don't win. And that's how we ensure that acts of genuine kindness, like the one that saved my life, continue to happen in a world that desperately needs more of them. The note that changed everything simply said, "Run, it's a trap." But the real message was much deeper than that. It was a reminder that there are still people in the world willing to risk everything to protect a stranger. And that's a message worth remembering, no matter what betrayals you may have survived or what disappointments you may have endured. Because in the end, the Celestes of the world will always outnumber the Sandra Mitchells. You just have to learn to recognize the difference between them. Now, tell me in the comments section, if you were in my shoes, how would you have handled your family demands? Please be honest. Would you the same or cut them off completely after they betrayed you the first time? I'd love to know in the comments section. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Before you go, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. We value every subscriber of this channel, and all your comments are read and appreciated. Thank you very much. We post videos every single day on this channel, so it's a good thing if you check out other videos here too. See you in the next story. Bye!